part of the story, right? The other part of the story is all the Ryan Grimms of this world. We have to be very clear. They are cynical purveyors. They are snake oil salesmen who are very consciously peddling the Democratic Party support. And, I've seen on Twitter, some people are tweeting like, hey, are you a masochist? Why are you going towards Ryan Grimm? Why are you going to these podcasts if you know that you're not going to get any agreement on these things? But we have to be clear. He's not engaging in some self-sacrifice, and it is not about him. It's about people like him. People like him are determinedly peddling this line, even more so now because the Democratic establishment recognizes that this is very clear as a betrayal in the eyes of hundreds of thousands, unconvinced, and perhaps even millions of workers. That is why they need their spokespersons everywhere peddling that line to the extent that they're able to push it forward. So they're not engaging in some honest debate in any way. They are very doggedly pushing their line because that allows the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars and the Pramila Jayapals to then, be behind the scenes, so they don't have to dirty their hands. They have the Ryan Grimms and whoever else to be the punching bag for them. But in reality, there is nothing genuine or honest about it. And their job, the job of these kinds of so-called analysts who appear on all these shows and write all these articles, their job is to obscure the reality as much as they can, even in the face of this spectacular betrayal. And unfortunately, I think we have to say what's unfortunate in this situation is to the extent that one or two of the worker leaders have provided grist to the Ryan Grimm mill by giving them cover. We as workers and working class leaders, we should not participate in the cover of betrayals. We should call out betrayals for what they are, which is betrayals, and not try to hem and haw around it and say, oh, maybe there was something genuine. Oh, maybe it was a Hail Mary. No, it wasn't.
Welcome to another episode of the Nick and CJ Show. I'm one of your hosts. I'm CJ. What's up, Nick?
What's poppin', my friends, my family? We are back for another fantastic week of RBN Live. We have a lot to discuss today. I have my friends from 10 Demands that will be joining me as well. And it's been cracking. It's been crazy in Brazil last few days. So we're definitely going to cover that. And I want to make the distinction because there are a lot of people that are like trying to sell this and use this to sell January 6th. And that's, I see what you're going to bring up as well. There's very staunch fundamental differences. For one, we live in the heart of the empire where January 6th was more of a clown show infighting, right? January 6th was clown show empire infighting. What you have in Brazil, you have one group that was literally got their political power and traced their lineage from the far-right militaristic coup that the far-right government that took power after the coup that the United States and the UK led in 1964. And you have one side that has got heavily militaristic that used death squads to go after their opposition, known as Bolsonaro, right? So you have one side that's backed by empire. I got a story I'm going to show you guys where the UK was heavily invested and they was pouring money to Bolsonaro because Bolsonaro wanted to privatize Brazil oil and gas. So you have Western powers and Western capitalism that benefits from the rise of Bolsonaro. And just like in Venezuela, you have a class dynamic where you have the upper bourgeoisie that is waging class war, businesses that are taking the side of Bolsonaro. You have police, and you look at these two different responses. We're going to talk about the police a lot today. In the United States, the liberal class used January 6th to prop up the police.
Yes.
You have Lula calling the police out. Now they're going after the police. They fired the Brazilia's governor who was complicit with it. What they do in the United States, they essentially pretty much entrapped the protesters and gave the police awards, and they started to pump them up more. So it's too.
I think it's curious, though.
I got a lot of breakdown, but go ahead, CJ.
There is a lot. I think it's curious, though, Nick, that Bolsonaro showed up in Florida with all the other sort of like
Oh yeah, and there's
Latin class traders, and then there's a coup. Like, I like. Do you think there's coincidences with shit like that? I absolutely do not. He is
I see Democrats.
He's establishing an alibi. Hey, Americans, look at me. What is he doing out in the fast food places? He's establishing an alibi. There's a coup about to come that I know is coming, sir. And I'm out with my alibi. It's very curious to me. And everybody's like, when does this head of state just walking around in Orlando? Like JB was like, he's right here in my city chilling. You know how unusual that is?
Yeah.
Now there's a coup.
In Florida
This is not a coincidence. Go ahead.
Yeah, in Florida, it's full of anti-communists. That's the anti-communist retreat for people that come from South America, people who was loyal to the U.S. empire. That's why if anyone's a state puppet, if anyone is CIA, is Bolsonaro. We have U.S. companies that was propping this right-wing movement up because they wanted to privatize. They wanted to get hold of Brazilian markets. And then you had Bolsonaro, who's staunchly anti-communist, who's extremely pro-Israel. I got another story I'm going to show you guys later today.
Oh, that's
how
terrible.
Far-right apartheid groups help boast up the most extreme elements in Brazil. And you had a lot of Brazilians who believe in these crazy conspiracy theories because you have police officers, you have military members who are loyal to Bolsonaro. So they believe that Lula being elected was a sham this whole time. Meanwhile, you have Bolsonaro chilling in Florida, not saying shit. So there's a strong argument, and I'm gonna get to this later because I'm really getting introduction. I'm gonna introduce Zoya.
Yeah.
Here. There's a strong argument that Lula is stronger now because there was a lot of Bolsonaro-like politicians that was still being very vague on who they see president. There was this big question mark, especially after a lot of Bolsonaro-style Congress people still retain their seats. But now there are a lot of Bolsonaro people that are backing off. There are a lot of Bolsonaro supporters that's like, yeah, we support Lula's government after this. So there's an argument to be made, and an argument I've seen made that Lula is stronger now after this attack because now you got Latin American countries. You have Mexican president coming out. You have all these Latin American leaders coming out and support Lula and his government coalition. So there's an argument that he's stronger now than he was before the attack, especially considering like obviously pro Bolsonaro figures being purged. Like the governor in Brasilia is gone now. The police is being targeted in Brazil. There's a lot of small differences. It's easy to make a soundbite. It's easy to do what the lazy shit libs do. Like, oh my God, it's just like January 6th. No, there's a lot of differences. There's a lot of historical examples. For example, Lula being imprisoned by Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro and his government going after Lula supporters. So it's not like a one-off failed publicity stunt. That's the result of infighting. This has been a long time government violence fight that's been going on in Brazil. A lot of it that's been propped up by the CIA. A lot of it that started because the coup of the government in 1964. But anyway, I'm spoiling a lot of it.
Yeah, we're spoiling a lot, but
I'm gonna get
yes,
we talk about some policing. I got some policing stories we can discuss while we still wait for some guests.
Let me do the announcements, and then I'm gonna drop out and produce the segment for the panel. So let's just do a couple of announcements. But this is the tweet that's gonna be coming up. We're discussing from AOC. Somebody has. That's the tweet. So if you wanted to go look at it and research it before we get to that segment, you can. But let's go ahead and like this stream. The last time I checked, we were around 50 likes. We have 150 people watching. Now, this is a great panel coming up before some of our other stories. So let's make sure we get as many people as we can here. And the only way we can do that is if everybody watching likes the stream. Let's try to get to 140. 140, that's essentially like 90 more likes. If we can get like 90 more people to hit that like button, let's get some more people in for this next panel. Also, if you're a new subscriber, we already passed 28,200. So keep subscribing. Thank you for those. Join our Substack if you want to get the link to our Discord, or if you need notifications for when we go live or when we do clips. And always, we like to shout out our editor, Aaron, who's doing all the beautiful work, cutting those clips and also creating those thumbnails. So, Nick, I pass it back
Yeah.
to you, sir, for that panel, and I'll be in the
Thank you. I
back.
want to introduce my major friends. I'm gonna get Zoya in here, and Awkward. Awkward had. I'm glad that he's able to join us a little bit. I know he has some family emergencies. I won't say unless you want. So I pop Awkward in here. We have Zoya here as well, and Zoya, I want you to introduce our guest. I appreciate you for joining us as well, Samuel. Give us a thumb up when you're ready. But Zoya, welcome to RBN once again. Zoya, we are discussing our 10 demands. How you doing, Zoya?
I'm phenomenal. Happy to be here with you and the community. We have a guest today from Concerned Black Citizens, and we are also waiting on Camilla, who's in charge of passing reparations in California. And that's what we're here to discuss today. Demand number 8 of our 10 demands, reparations and apologies.
So here's the list of our demands, because this is the 8th installment of this series. If you guys don't know, I co-founded 10 Demands with my good friend Zoya and Ak, where we pretty much have a list of demands and set a path towards abolition. And we created this on the midst of the rise of the George Floyd movement, because we didn't want it to die. We wanted to give people direction. We want to give people goals to fight for. So I'm going to read the demands. And when you see here, we did videos covering all the demands. And this is this segment covering number 8. We may need a part 2. We see. But number 1 is defund the police, reallocate resources to impact the community. We did a stream covering that. Number 2 is demilitarize the police. Number 3 is eliminate discriminatory policing, prosecution, and sentencing. Number 4 is institute complete law enforcement transparency and accountability. And you can find all these on 10forjustice.com. Number 5 is independently investigate all police crimes and abuses of power. Number 6, install community representation, oversight, and safety measures. This is the one we did last time. End strategic counter-protest violence. The one we are now, apologize and provide reparations. Apologize publicly. Actually, we read that here soon, but here's number 9. We're gonna get to these here soon. End the war on drugs, and number 10, end carceral punishment. But before we get to that, I want to introduce our guest. That we got Samuel here. I want to make sure we get him introduced. Thank you for taking time to join us on Revolutionary Blackout. We love talking about police violence, the class warfare. Obviously, I'm a co-founder of 10 Demands as well. I appreciate you for joining us. Do you want to give us a quick introduction and who you are, Samuel, and the kind of work you get into in abolition?
Yeah, so my name is Samson Yangwe. I'm a founder of Mapping Police Violence and the Police Scorecard. My work focuses on getting and analyzing data on police violence across the country and using that data to fight for change, to fight for abolition, to fight for an end of police and carceral systems, et cetera.
And in my opinion, I want to get your thoughts on this, because this is a story that we had covered as well. In order to be a true advocate of the workers, you must resist this police state that steals wealth from us, that commit violence against our people. And Samuel, to get started, I want to get your guys' reaction to this, and then we can get to the reparations, because this is a story I covered before. Police they continue to double down on their violence. It never stops. Killings by police reached record high in 2022. Law enforcement killed at least 1,176 people. And by the way, you might as well double this number. They undercount this all the time, and they got ways to make this number less than what it actually appear. So this is already a horrific number, but I guarantee you this number is higher. But I want to pass it to Zoya and Samuel if you want to respond, and why you guys think it's so important to resist this police that we live in. Let's start with Samuel and we go to Zoya, just for your general reaction to that insane story.
Yeah, I mean, so the story is based on the data that our organization, Mapping Police Violence, collects. And we've been tracking killings by police across the country. As you mentioned, it's likely an undercount because we rely on information that's been reported in the media. Not every time somebody's killed by the police, it gets reported in the media. Sometimes it's swept under the rug. The police often, they cover it up. So, but what we do know in tracking this, and again, we have data from the past 10 years now of data, is that 2022 was a record high. As you said, nearly 1,200 people at least were killed by police. This is the highest number in the past 10 years. Black people more than 3 times more likely to be killed than white people. So in many ways, some of the things that we've been talking about for quite a long time continue to happen, and if anything, are getting worse and not better, despite the what the police would have you believe and what a lot of legislators would have you believe, that they fixed everything and that somehow the system is somehow sound and not producing the same outcomes that we know it's been producing for quite some time. So that's sort of big picture in the data. But happy to dive into some of the details. I know there are some particular trends and findings in the data that are new. So sheriff's departments in 2022 made up about 36% of all killings by police were by sheriff's departments, which is a record, and something that challenges us to think differently about how we're organizing in some of these spaces, because sheriffs are an elected position, but at the same time, it's a position that, like, there's not a good sheriff, right? Like, there's not a good whatever. So how do we think differently about removing some of the most violent sheriffs in the country, but also at the same time doing that as we're pushing towards a system in which hopefully sheriffs are obsolete? Yeah,
well said, Samuel. Zoe, I want to get your reaction to that story as well. And CJ, if you got a chance, can you pull this back? Actually, I can add it to the stream. But this is the map that CJ, who's producing this, pulled up. This is the map of police killings. Zoe, you have anything you want to add about this? Our horrific state of police, where this is now normalized. Zoe, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, another facet to consider in this story is, in spite of the propaganda, we actually know that crime is down. So while crime is down, for some reason, these death squads are out there still committing these horrendous crimes and taking lives. So I really don't understand what we're funding instead of social services while crime is down.
And think about it, guys, and think about how much the police lied to us. Remember the last election, they would say, oh my gosh, the radical left, it has defunded the police, now crime is up, and this is why we got to elect tough on crime Democrats and hard right wingers. And this is something that Eric Adams said verbatim. Pretty much all the Democrats was repeating this. Meanwhile, and then after the election, like, oh, psych, guys, you guys know the crime rate is actually down. Oh, man. But that's how they will lie openly just in order to justify their budgets. And I'm going to read this. You can keep here for a second, CJ. This is Lee Camp. According to Lancet, the numbers of Americans killed by police is actually double the official number each year. And Samuel, I'm going to ask you about this if you want to clarify and you want to share your thoughts about that. But it says, so that means 2022 saw closer to 2,400 murders by police. That's 6.4 killings a day. Do you want to add to this and provide some context if you can?
Yeah, and I've seen like the statistic shared a lot, and it's a little bit more complicated than this. So the Lancet did a study where they looked at the official numbers, the numbers that the government puts out on how many people are killed by police. Those numbers are, they've been so low. In fact, the reason why I started mapping police violence was because the government's numbers were obviously an undercount. We needed to have better data on who's getting killed by the police. So they took the government's numbers, which suggested 500 to 600 people were killed by police a year, which we know is an undercount. They compared that to the data that we produce at Mapping Police Violence, as well as a database, Fatal Encounters, which is another database. And by comparing it to our database and Fatal Encounters, that's where they determined that the official numbers were undercounting by about 55%. So it's not that it's twice as many as the 1,100 to 1,200 people as we track in Mapping Police Violence. It's twice as many as the 500 to 600 that the government puts out. But there's a big but there. The but is that the actual number of people who are killed due to the carceral system is much larger than the number of people who are killed strictly by the police.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because there are about 1,100 to 1,200 people killed by the police, like outside of jails, outside of custody, in the process of making an arrest, being stopped, etc., being chased. Then, in addition to that, there are at least another 800 to 1,000 people who are killed in jail custody across the country. And then there are even more people who are killed in prisons. So if you add all of that together, you actually do get a number probably larger than 2,400 a year. But it's not all by the police. It's the police. You got the county sheriffs that are often run the jails. You got State Department of Corrections that run the prisons. So it's a bigger system than that. But overall, it is about 3,000 to 4,000 people who die every year in the context of that system.
Yeah. Zoe, anything you want to add before I move on to the next part?
That is a very tough act to follow. I just wanted to say, Sammy, it's also a pleasure to just meet you and have you on the show, because we've been citing your data for a really long time. It's incredibly helpful in the work that we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I want to explain why I believe it's important to continue to fight for reparations, especially tie it to the constitutional state as well. And then I'm gonna get Zoya in here, and she can speak on this as well, and why this is such an important topic. But a lot of ignorant people, especially a lot of people who speak about reparations, they say, "Oh my God, slavery was such a long time ago. Why can't you guys let it go?" Ignoring the fact that generational wealth exists. But secondly, they ignore the wealth that has been stolen with us made because of our custodial system. Now, this is a story I share all the time. You have civil asset forfeiture that studies show around 65% of the people targeted by civil asset forfeiture are Black males. And then you had the regressive fines and fees from our community being over policed, the legal fees, bail, the constant drag on our wealth by our system. And not only is our labor that was extracted by the system that white families benefit from generationally, you had the system itself siphoning our wealth to benefit the prison industrial complex. You have prison slave labor. There is the issue of land theft, which a lot of people haven't heard about. And this is a great article that talks about it. Why haven't you heard about Black land theft? And why you should. And this article does a great job explaining the historical fact that 90% of our land has been stolen. And one study that was done in Alabama shows that it will, like, if you look at the amount that was stolen from descendants of slaves and African Americans, that it adds up to the billions of dollars today. Here's one. It said a research team calculated the value of stolen land in Mississippi to be around 3.7 billion to 6.6 billion in today's dollars. And I'm just getting started. I can go all day with some more numbers, but I wanted to get into this demand, and I'll pass it to Zoya, and you can also expand on why you believe it was so important to add this on our list. And we also can read from it as well if you want to add to the Zoya. And then we get Samuel in here as well.
Yeah, we should probably read it first. So the demand itself is apologize publicly and provide indemnification. Thank you. To
I got it.
victims
I was trying to zoom in a little bit more.
It's perfect. To victims of police violence and racial discrimination in policing, prosecution, and sentencing. Passed the Commission to Study Reparations Act, H.R. 40 and S. 1083. Mandate Congress implement and enact the recommendation reparation proposals within 120 days of the submission of the Commission's report, and immediately begin reparation disbursement to improve the lives of African descendants in the United States and to foster economic, social, and political parity. Invest in equitable opportunities for tribal nations and provide reparations to all descendants of indigenous peoples of America. Recognize all tribal nations and honor in perpetuity all treaties, including those not ratified, as well as obligations to support self-determination and return stolen land. Issue and read a formal apology to the Black Americans and indigenous peoples. Implement comprehensive, factual, and unabridged social studies pertaining to Black Americans and indigenous peoples as part of the national curriculum to combat their erasure, foster compassion, and shift the paradigm of systemic racism and implicit bias. So the demand kind of speaks for itself. We know the systemic racism that's gone on in the system, and I sent you a lot of links, but I'm just going to cite data from one of the screenshots, which maybe a lot of people don't know, that indigenous slavery is a piece of the history of slavery that has been glossed over. Between 1492 and 1880, 2 to 5.5 million indigenous people were enslaved in the Americas, in addition to 12.5 million African slaves. These numbers are grossly underestimated, but part of the reason that we included indigenous people in reparations is because they were also subjugated by the system. And we believe in returning land, and that reparations should should not just be cash payments alone because of housing discrimination and other challenges that people have faced in the system. And just like Nick said, that prevented them from accumulating generational wealth. Meanwhile, the infrastructure that was built by slavery is in use right now, profiting the system.
Yeah, well said. Hopefully, we may have to reschedule for Camilla. I don't know if she has time to join us today, but I want to get Samuel in here. And if you have anything you want to add to the discussion in terms of the wealth stolen by the police state and the demand for reparations, Samuel, if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with civil asset forfeiture and the way in which the police extract wealth from black and brown communities. And one of the things that has been a statistic that has always sort of stuck in my mind is that this was back in 2014. They published this data that the police actually steal more in the total value of goods from people through civil asset forfeiture than the total amount stolen by all of the burglaries that happen in the U.S. in a typical year. So I mean, it is billions and billions of dollars that the state, local, state, and federal law enforcement take from civilians and primarily from black and brown civilians. The other piece of this is that, I mean, for each of these issues, there are particular laws that have been attempted and proposed to address pieces of this. So, like with civil asset forfeiture, I know that there are a number of states that have tried to restrict or abolish the practice by essentially saying that that the police can't take anything from you without a criminal conviction. Two, even if there is a conviction, that if they confiscate any property, it doesn't end up in the police coffer. So like the police confiscate the property and then it ends up in another body that holds it, not the police. The police don't benefit from their own thefts. But even those things tend to be, oftentimes like scratching the surface. We know that the police engage in practices that contravene the law all the time and don't face any consequences. And civil asset forfeiture as a whole is like a tiny piece of the total amount of resources that go to policing. Most of those resources are appropriated by the city, right? It's the city council that will appropriate based on tax dollars. So that's like the big picture. All of these billions, I think it's something like $80 billion that goes into policing in a typical year. It's mostly through these city councils appropriating the money from local tax revenue, which again, I mean, a lot of that is from black and brown communities as well. So we got to figure out like each of these income streams to the police. How do we cut them off? How do we divert them? How do we reinvest them into communities? Civil asset forfeiture is one example, but there's a whole bunch of other examples that need to be a part of the reinvestment, the redistribution, and the reparations.
Yeah, well said. And we have a fantastic guest that joined us. Thank you, for Camilla. Give us a thumbs up when you're ready, and I'll introduce you. But Camilla has been working on the California task force for reparations. And I'm going to share this video with her, and then we introduce her, and then I want to get her in this fantastic conversation. Let's listen to this video here where Camilla Moore discussed what she means by reparations.
Some of them being Dr. William Spriggs, Dr. Darity, Thomas Kramer, and others. I mean, these economists have worked alongside us over this past year to come up with potential estimates for what reparations in the form of compensation or cash payments can look like for African Americans who are descendants of free and enslaved Black people who were living in the United States prior to 1900. And in order to come up with these potential compensation, they had to have the data or the evidence to undergird whatever their potential estimates were. So based on their research, as you said, they noted 5 state-sanctioned atrocities, 5 harms that the state of California, there is evidence and data to support that the state was culpable in housing discrimination and houselessness being one of the 5. And as you mentioned, that $500 billion number represents the state of California's maximum culpability for racist redlining practices from 1933 with the implementation of the Home Loan Corporation, lasting until 1977 with the end of racist redlining practices with the Community Reinvestment Act of 19.
So as you see, I want to introduce our guest, Camilla here. I appreciate her for joining. I want to make sure she's ready. Here we go. Let's get Camilla in here. That was a great introduction for her. Thank you for taking time to join us. We're having a conversation about reparations. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Excuse my tardiness, but yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, no worries. We've just been making the argument and explaining why there is a need for reparations. What inspired you to join this fight, and why you think it's important to fight for reparations, Camilla?
There's so many, you know, factors I could talk about in terms of what inspires me to do this work. But just growing up, you know, in South Central LA, seeing the material conditions of, you know, the Black American community and what we had to kind of go through in our community, dilapidated, you know, businesses, you know, unequal schools, um, homelessness, right? State sanctioned violence from the police and otherwise. And so, really, just seeing my surroundings growing up, I think definitely inspired me to do the work for reparatory justice. Also, I grew up in a, you know, an environment where, you know, Black American history was a source of pride for my family. And so, as a kid, you know, I would read slave narratives, I would enter into oratorical contests, you know, honoring, you know, African American historical figures like Martin Luther King and Langston Hughes and so many other folks within our community. And then also when I went to law school as well, I see that as a source of my inspiration as well. I went to law school with an intent purpose to study reparatory justice, to see how I could utilize the law as a tool for liberation, because usually when we think about the law, we think about it as a source of oppression. So, you know, I went to Columbia Law School. So I obtained a traditional Juris Doctorate degree from Columbia, but I also obtained a Master of Laws or a Master of Laws or an LLM in International Criminal Law from the University of Amsterdam Law School as well. So, and while in Amsterdam, I wrote a thesis on global reparatory justice for people of African descent, for the transatlantic slave trade, the institution of slavery, and its afterlife. And in the thesis, I primarily focused on Black Americans in the United States, Black Colombians, and Black Brazilians, with this idea that out of all the folks in the African diaspora, Black Colombians, Brazilians, and Black Americans, we are most closely connected in the terms of we're still living in the same society of as our former enslavers, you know, as opposed to, for instance, Black people in Caribbean or Africa who have had not only, you know, decolonization movements, but independence movements. We're still Black Americans, Black Colombians, Black Brazilians, you know, still forced to really live alongside of our former enslavers. So we're still living in enslaved societies. And that's not to, you know, indict or to minimize the struggles that currently Black Caribbeans and Black Africans currently face, right? But just noting the parallels between the histories of Black Colombians, Black Brazilians, and Black Americans. So, you know, there's so many different, like I said, factors that go into what inspired me with this work. But again, just to summarize, you know, my childhood, the environment I lived in, you know, the upbringing of my family in particular, and all of that kind of helped me to want to go to law school. And then, you know, the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah. So, as someone who's passionate about this as well, but I am also 100% aware that the ruling class will never, they will never give us anything without struggle. I don't see reparations being won through the two-party duopoly, whether it be through the Democratic or Republican Party or through electoral politics. I think we need a more militant-style approach to win these asks over. But as someone who's been working on this, what has been your experience in terms of reception on reparations? Like, what are the biggest hang up you ran into advocating for reparations in the state of California? How has the ruling class been receptive to your approach in terms of getting reparation passed? Camilla, if you want to speak on that.
So again, I'm speaking personally, so not on behalf of the task force or anything, but based on my experience, you know, the task force began their work June of 2021. So we're a 2-year legislative advisory body. We don't have the power to enact any legislation into law, to create legislation. We just have the power to advise the California state legislature on the types of reparations proposals that they should turn into legislation, and then it'll be up to the governor of the state to enact that legislation into law. So again, to me, speaking personally, as someone has, seen through, sat through the process since we started June 2021, pushback from the ruling class. Well, I mean, I guess the typical pushback is people who don't think reparations are owed, who think that this is frivolous, who thinks that, there's so many emails that I get personally where people are just like saying this is frivolous, this is a waste of time. We were never slaves. Folks living today were never, enslavers, and therefore, what is the purpose of this task force is essentially kind of the pushback that has been sustained since we started this work, which is to be expected.
And how do you overcome those objections, Camilla? Because I hear the same things all the time.
So again, personally speaking, just have talking points ready to go. But at the same time, I see that pushback as a distraction. And so, yes, while talking points are good, at the same time, we don't want to necessarily give energy to folks who are kind of committed to misunderstanding this sacred political project. And so, how do I respond? Sometimes I just don't, and I just focus on making sure that we get one step closer to achieving, again, this sacred political project.
I want to ask your thoughts on this, and I will get you in here, Samuel and CJ. Oh, go ahead, CJ. Go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, let me just chime in on that, because if there is a response, because I believe just ignoring foolishness, but if there is a response, this is what we could say. Okay, for the people who were actual slaves, where is their money? If they put it in a bank, if they saved it, where is that? Who has their money? Did it disappear? So those people who were actual slave, they would have been paid. They would have passed that money down to their kids, to their kids, to their kids, and it would be in my pocket right now. So this is very easy logic of them. So how about you just say, why don't we give us all your white ancestral heirlooms? They don't belong to you. It's such a silly, ridiculous
exactly
play. It's such an infantile sort of intellectual argument, because you're acting like there's no inheritance when literally the white infrastructure that most white people benefit from, or can benefit from is a better way of saying it, is literally built on the backs of that sort of belief of inheritance, of belief of giving it to your kids and passing it along. But why don't Black people get that? So that's what I wanted to interject. I'll hop back in the back. This makes me furious when this particular pushback on this topic.
Yeah,
and,
you want to speak on that, Camilla? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the argument that I make as well. People are more than happy to take up inheritances, but when we talk about a debt that's owed, then people just lose that whole entire concept. And even also, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, in a statement last year, in 2021, she made a statement at an event that the U.S. economy, of course, has never worked for Black Americans, and she specifically talked about inheritances, to Compton Jay's point.
Yeah, that played a big part in land theft in the article I was reading. But go ahead. That's also a good point on that.
I mean, you have the U.S. Secretary of Treasury essentially saying a lot of white Americans, the wealth that they have acquired today was through inheritances. That was something completely denied to us as African Americans.
Yeah, well said. I want to get Samuel and Zoe, if you guys have anything you want to add real quick before I move on to the next part, and Samuel and Zoe, if you have anything you want to add. I'll move on to.
I got something really quick, just as far as our approach to making reparations a reality. HR 40 is the bill that we mentioned in our demand, and every Congress since 1989 failed to pass it. And it's just a study on reparations. It's not reparations themselves. Last year, there was finally some movement on it where it passed the House Judiciary Committee, but then it remained stalled there. The progress we've made is in Evanston, Illinois. It's the first city to issue reparations. It's actually a $10 million project that's gone into effect, and it's completely funded by legal cannabis sales. For those who say, where's the money going to come from? Here's a pilot program that's totally being funded by legalized marijuana, so no one has to be concerned where the money comes from. And Newsom announced that he's going to give $569 billion for reparations in California. And yeah. I just wanted Camilla's opinion on that. Yeah, she's shaking her head no. So let's debunk this because he's going to run for president and use this.
No. So Governor Newsom has not made any commitments because the California State Reparations Task Force has not made any final recommendations. So the task force has until June 30th, 2023 to make final recommendations that will be enshrined in this final report that we will then submit to the California State Legislature no later than June 30th, 2023 or July 1. Now, that number that you just referenced, that $569 billion figure, that is not a number that the task force has committed to in terms of final recommendations for reparations in the form of compensation. Where that number comes from is this. The California Reparations Task Force, we hired 5 people to serve on our economic consultant team, those being Dr. William A. Darity, public policy professor Thomas Kramer, economist William Spriggs, who was once the dean of economics at Howard University, Professor Casey Campbell, and Kirsten Mullen, who is Darity's partner and wrote the book with him, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. Over this past year, that 5-member economic consultant team, they presented to the task force potential monetary figures for what reparations might look like in the form of compensation for 5 state-sanctioned crimes, 5 state-sanctioned atrocities that there's data to support that California as a state was culpable in. Those 5 state-sanctioned crimes include, right, mass incarceration and over-policing is 1, unjust property taking, so think about Bruce Beach, that's number 2. Health harms, that's number 3. Number 4 is devaluation of Black businesses. And number 5 is housing discrimination and homelessness. So where, again, just to conclude, that $569 billion figure came from the economists, 1, so not the task force. And 2, what that $569 billion amount represents is the state of California's maximum culpability for its culpability in perpetuating housing discrimination practices from 1933 with the advent of the Homeowners Loan Corporation to the end of so-called racist redlining practices in 1977 with the implementation of the Community Reinvestment Act. So again, that came from the economists. That's how they calculated, again, what the state's maximum culpability was for housing discrimination in particular from that particular time frame if all Black people in California ended up being eligible. So that was just very theoretical. The right-wing media pounced on that and, pretty much falsely reported that one is a final recommendation coming out of the task force when we have 6 more months to do our work. And 2, it came from the economists that is advising us, not from us specifically, because we still have 6 months to do our work. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did because I see a lot of these attempts by the Democratic Party and a lot of politicians to water down the ass and then use it as a political victory. And I kind of want to float this question to the panel, and this will be the last question before we wrap up here. But I'm going to use this as an example, and you just exposed how that number was bullshit that was flowing around. This says Evanston passed reparations in 2019, the city has only spent $400,000 of the $10 million promised. Out of the hundreds of Black residents who applied, 16 received the money. At least 5 have died before the promised reparations could be dispersed. So whenever I see a lot of ruling class promises on reparations, I see them watering it down, or they just straight out commit false promises there. So I'm asking you guys, just as a strategy question, what do you guys think Black activists should do about this? And these are things I've been asking ourselves here at Revolutionary Blackout, whether we should have a dedicated third party that is for reparations and criminal justice, because I don't think it's going to happen through the two-party duopoly. So I know that's a very loaded question, and it's a hard question to answer. But in general, I'm asking you guys, what are you guys' strategy that we should engage in to deal with these bullshit artists in the establishment that will never give us our dead owed? I'll go Camilla and then Samuel. I want to get you in there, and then Zoya, and then we can wrap up the panel.
Yes, thank you again for having me. And yes, I read that article on Evanston so-called reparations this morning. It's an amazing article by Emmanuel Felton of Washington Post. And it really outlines how what's going on in Evanston is not reparations, full stop. Yeah. As an international reparatory justice scholar, reparations is at least supposed to come in 5 forms: compensation, restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and guarantees of non-repetition. What's going on in Evanston is a housing voucher program. They committed $25,000 for housing repairs, mortgage payments, and things like that. No outright cash payments. And as you noted, right, the people that they identified, they did it through a lottery system. Only current homeowners can apply. So that excludes the vast majority of the Black community in Evanston, which are renters. And as you noted, the people that they did selected, many of them are passing away, right, before they're able to get what they are so-called owed. So there's a lot of issues with what's going on in Evanston. I don't necessarily consider it reparations at all. And then also it's kind of problematic that that the funding is coming from marijuana tax. It's a long story about why I think that's problematic. But yeah, I'll just say that to answer your question more directly, yes, I think that's a great idea. There needs to be, personally speaking, not me speaking on behalf of the task force, but personally speaking, there definitely needs to be, more grassroots intervention to make sure that any of these programs that are popping up locally on the state level, and then of course federally, are not just, for fluff. And that
and it's easy to get caught up, and people do it with good faith, because when we see a headline that say, "Oh, this X city is exploring reparations," and people, "Oh, that's good," so people immediately want to get excited over it. But most of the time, almost every single time, whenever you dig into the weeds, it's usually a lot of watering down. But Samuel, I want to get any last thoughts you may have on the battle for the debt is owed, the cost of the criminal justice system on families. You can speak on whatever you think is important at this point. Samuel, thank you for joining. I know this is last second, so I appreciate you joining us for this conversation, Samuel.
No,
thank you. Your work is great, by the way.
Yours too. So just really quick, working through the state, it's going to get watered down, right? Like if it happens at all. And we know how they do this. They'll replace a program that was specifically designed to compensate folks who are descendants of folks who were enslaved or folks who underwent Jim Crow, and they'll turn it into, well, we want a program that's going to invest disproportionately in communities with high rates of poverty or more concentrated poverty, or we'll focus on particular neighborhood-based programs, try to create some sort of a proxy. But at the end of the day, what often happens is those resources don't end up making it to the people who need it most, the people who the programs were intended to actually support. And then when a program is designed that actually is narrowly tailored, designed to specifically help folks who need that help, it often gets struck down by the courts as racially discriminatory. We got to watch out from the Supreme Court, right? So let's say we design the program, they pass the program, it's very specific in who is targeted. This court, of course, they're going to try to strike it down. So we got to figure out alternative routes to get at this, because we know working through the system is going to end up with that type of result.
Yeah, well said, Samuel. And once again, I appreciate you for joining us on this panel. I know this is the last second. Zoya, any other last thoughts on anything that we discussed here on reparations, strategies to hold the ruling class accountable and any other strategy you want to endorse on how we can get this done. Because I know I love the rising popularity of reparations, but I think a strategy has to be something that's important that we discuss as well, which is why the work you do, Camilla, is so important, putting this stuff out there. But Zoya, any last thoughts? Not get before we get near the end of here, Zoya.
Yeah, first of all, we have to normalize reparations. Reparations have already been paid to other communities. It's not a radical concept. And it is absolutely time for an apology and reparations. For people who say others have been wronged, great. Granting reparations in this case will lay the groundwork for your case, so you should absolutely support it. And as far as implementation, I was thinking about how I'm going to answer this, because if you would have asked me decades ago.
Oh, I don't know. Hopefully, I think we may have lost Zoya. Technical difficulties happen every once in a while. But with that said, I want to pass it to you, Camilla. What can they find you? Anything you want to shout out? Any final last thoughts before we send you off? And Zoya, if you come back, I'll pass it to you. But let's hear from Camilla while you return. Any last thoughts? Where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Camila V. Moore. You can also go to my website, CamilaMoore.com, and there's a contact page for folks to stay connected. And if you want to learn more about the task force, you can go to our website at oag.ca.gov/AB30. AB3121, and then also look at our interim report that we just released in 2022. It's 500 pages, 13 chapters long, the most comprehensive report on the African American community since the 1968 Kerner Commission. It's a lot of great data there. So thank you all for the time, hoping that we can do this again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we definitely got to do this again. We kind of threw this panel together last second, so we appreciate you guys for joining us. We got to have a longer, more in-depth conversation. And Samuel, same go to you. Thanks for joining us last second. Where can they find you? Where can they find your work? Great contribution. Thank you again.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Samswey, SAMSWEY. Organization, Mapping Police Violence, mappingpoliceviolence.us. Feel free to reach out. Happy to work with anybody.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, Samuel and Camilla. Big shout out to both of you guys. I'm going to pop both of you guys out. And CJ, if you're ready, there we go. Let's get CJ back in. Now we can continue our regularly scheduled programming. I'll pass you, CJ. I got to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Yeah, because I'm going to do some announcements.
I'll be right back.
I'm going to do some announcements while Nick is back. I can pop Zoya back in. Zoya, did you get can you hear us? Let's make sure.
Oh, sorry, my power went out. I was just going to close the segment by saying, as far as implementation,
absolutely.
That decades ago, I would have said, we just follow the rules, we do what we're told by the system, get the appropriate paperwork going, and just get petitions signed and follow the rules, and everything will be fine. But I was somewhat naive back then, and after decades of fighting the system, specifically in California where Camilla is at, I know it's extremely corrupt. I know they watered down legislation, because I was part of the process where we were pushing for legislation and they kept watering it down. Even the program where they legalized marijuana, they're supposed to be those who were impacted by the war on drugs, which I call illegal, were supposed to be first in line to open dispensaries and get these licenses. And in practice, what ended up happening is that predatory business people who had a lot of money and interest found those who were in dire straits, in desperate situations, and bought them off in order to file for licenses under their name, and then just took over power of attorney and still pocketed all the money. So there's just a huge difference in this corrupt system. Everything is so saturated with corruption that we're not going to win what we want by going through the system. If we have no alternative, I'll keep fighting within the system so that we get something. But ultimately, yes, I think we need a more grassroots and militant approach. And another thing that I wanted to end on is that the work that you guys are doing is so very vital, because there were so many things that are popular headlines that we brought up that Camilla was able to debunk. so that people don't think that Newsom has given $569 billion for reparations when it hasn't happened. So love you guys so much. Thank you for the panel. I'm going to stay tuned for what you guys are going to cover next, which is some crazy stuff happening in Brazil.
And also Camila, if people don't know, she was on RBN before. We did a whole stream. It could have been a whole stream, maybe a whole segment, but it's pinned to our Twitter. Her episode about reparations, the task force in California, it's pinned to our Twitter. It's been pinned for several weeks. So go check it out on our Twitter, or if you just go to our videos, it's under reparations. You can just, RBN and reparations, you'll be able to find it. That was her first appearance, and we told her during that conversation, of course, she's going to be back, and she's going to be back even more. We'll schedule it this time so we can talk longer with her, and she can bring her evidence. Like she has lots of evidence or receipts to show about that type of work. So, all right, Zoya, thanks a lot. We'll pop you
Zoya is live
in the back. And now I'll go ahead and do some announcements, Nick, as you set up for a Lula segment. It's kind of a long segment. We'll go through the regular stuff, and then we'll go through the AOC stuff and just the other people. Why are they all acting like they're down with Lula now when some of them wasn't even mentioning that he even got elected? That's crazy. So we'll get to that, but let's start with some announcements. Join our Substack. This really has become the way for people to, kind of stay connected to RBN. When we get to writing op-eds, this is going to be the way we notify you of that. RBN has a lot, in store. So Substack is the best way for us to get your contact information. So if you just want us to have your contact information, join our Substack. If you need notifications for when we go live or clips, join our Substack. If you need just the free access path to our Discord, join Substack. You can also get access to Discord if you are part of our Patreon. So that's something also I need to promote. If you're able to contribute monthly, Patreon is really the way that to make us the most stable, so that we can pay staff and do things like that. We're going to be bringing on an RBN logistics coordinator that's going to be kind of like doing a bunch of things in the background. So that's another sort of employee that we're going to be bringing on along with Aaron. So make sure you support us in all these spaces along with Substack. And then the last thing, let's like the stream. That was a great panel. 10 demands. Demand number 8. We're at 219 likes. We're at 300 people watching. Can we get another 80 people to hit that like button? Let's get 80 more people to hit that like button right now. Get us to 300. You see the panel in the back. I just noticed Kalanji right there. Panel in the back there. That's when Black Power Media came on to the Activist Summit. That's their hour right there. So like the stream, get us to 300 likes. Lots of great comments. I tried to get as many in there, Nick, because that was a great conversation. Nick got the great idea. I don't know if you saved any. I didn't see any super chats, but
I didn't get a chance to save anything. So
no, I didn't see any. So I didn't know if I missed any. So, but I'll go back through and we'll try to see if we have any. So thank you for the comments. I'll pass it back to you, Nick, to get to this crazy thing that's happening down in Brazil and AOC and all this stuff. So pass it back to you, sir.
Yeah. So let me tell you guys something about Bolsonaro supporters, right? Not exactly the smartest bunch. Not exactly the smartest bunch out there. So the Bolsonaro right has been embarrassed, emasculated recently, to the point where Bolsonaro had to flee the country, had to go to Florida, because he no longer has his precious immunity. And there's been this long-held thought that the military and military generals are just sitting there waiting to overthrow Lula, that the police will have their side, and that Lula being coronated will all just lie. And then you had these dumbasses who was helped by the police And this is why, if you're going to have any successful left-wing government or left-wing uprising, you must disband with the police and these military elements. That's extremely important. So I want to explain to you guys why, despite the bullshit narrative that AOC and everyone trying to paint, these are not the same. So in the United States, you had this literally, it was a protest and a publicity stunt gone wrong. We literally have footage of the police letting them in, the police being complicit, and then the Democrats gave them money, gave the Capitol Police surveillance powers, and made heroes of these people who were complicit and helped the rioters in January 6th. In Brazil and in Latin America in general, I explained to you guys, politics is mostly a class war. Lula supporters, people who support Lula, has been victim of police violence directed by Bolsonaro, militant thugs who attack their supporters. They used to send military death squads into Venezuela. I talked to indigenous activists where police that was Bolsonaro supporters would kill indigenous people, attack indigenous people, and then because they're so corrupt and the country is extremely right-wing in the institutions, they will get away with it. So you guys understand, there's a direct class element here. We have these rich bourgeoisie people, and there are already businesses that are already trying to undermine Lula in Brazil. A lot of the boutique class, the business owner class, the media class, who helped convince people that Lula was some puppet of the West who want to introduce socially liberal woke ideology into their culture, because Brazil is extremely socially conservative. Bolsonaro rode a wave of success in 2018 and even got a lot, and his party got a lot of success coming up because they're extremely socially conservative. But despite that, there's a class element. We have Black evangelicals who massively supported Lula. Indigenous poor people in Brazil largely supported Lula. So what we have here is a large class war against the democratically elected people government elected by Lula. And to the point where, unlike in the United States, Lula in Brazil is going after these people. The Supreme Court judge just got rid of the governor of Brasilia. Now, here's some videos of Bolsonaro in breaking into Congress. Congress. And if you look in the background, let me turn it down a little bit. What's important is if you look in the background, and this is what a lot of people calling out, and there's investigations that are going on right now. Instead of what happened in the United States where they was given more power, there's an investigation into the police for allowing this to happen. Now, here's another one.
Now, Nick, and that's a lot of what a lot of people who say the January 6th hearings are a sham. I'm one of them. Is like, because that's the centerpiece. Because that's the centerpiece that you're not even including in the trials. Like, this is a sham to me. So go ahead.
That's such a good point, CJ, because you guys understand, and it's been proven, and I would say the same thing here, that the feds are definitely in on this. There's definitely CI elements in the right, and it's very open. Hell, you got Steve Bannon that openly is infiltrating the Bolsonaro right in Brazil, Bannonites, and then CI people that is influencing the Bolsonaro supporters. There are a lot of reports of feds being on the ground here, just like on January 6th, right? I want to show this video as well, because in our country, you had the ruling class who let themselves off free. Not only off free, you had the police that was given surveillance power, they were getting bonuses, they was made heroes, right? Meanwhile, in Brazil, they literally launched an investigation police. Lula said we can't trust elements of the police. I'm gonna show you guys hear that very soon. What the United States did was entrap protesters. And a lot of the January 6th people will tell you this. They said, oh, we thought we was going to a legal protest. The police and our government officials led us to believe that it was a legal protest, and then they just got thrown under the bus. They arrested a ton of protesters in Brazil, but they're going after the police. Now I got that receipt coming here soon. Here's more evidence. Here are more videos of the police officers actively encouraging the insurrection. And also, you had a lot of these supporters that was marching down the streets, and they were being escorted by the Brazilian police. So this is how I'm framing this story. Then we're gonna laugh at the squad there later. I want you guys to understand these right-wing elements, capitalist loyal police, will side with these fascists in a heartbeat, like they did. And Lula understands this. I'm gonna get to his culture. So you see the police, they'll literally scoring them in. That's why a lot of people say, "Yo, this." There's some people say, "Yo, this is shady." It's like almost like they wanted this to happen, in a way. Now let's get to this. This is police in Brazil taking selfies as thousands of Bolsonaro supporters invade places of power. They're not even trying to stop them. Many believe the police support the protesters. Now, I actually know, like you see this guy on Twitter. This guy definitely a right wing guy, so you can see he's leaving flames of like, yeah, he's saying this like it's a good thing. Like, oh my God, look, see, even the police supports them. If I'm right, I don't know. I've seen this guy post a lot of right wing stuff. But you can tell by his tweet, like, he put flames, he laughing at the idea, right? So, CJ, I want to get your thoughts on this. I got some more to share. I'll pull it up. But you see how I explain this with Brazilian politics. It's different in the United States. It's much more of a class war. The Democratic Party is the party of the CIA. They're the party of the police. They're part of the military industrial complex. Both parties are the party of Wall Street. In Brazil, in Venezuela, and in Colombia, a lot of these South American countries, it's straight up a class war where you got the military officers, a lot of members of the bourgeoisie police. They support far-right capitalist elements. And you had the UK that poured millions. I'm going to share this receipt here soon because Bolsonaro wanted to continue to privatize oil and gas so UK companies can make profit. And now you got Bolsonaro that live in Florida. And these are the questions I ask, like some of these mad communists who say stuff like this. Well, there are a lot of people who say because Lula is not as far left as we want, because there is a legitimate criticism of Lula. You guys want to hear it? Lula is stronger than ever after this. One of the reasons why Lula is stronger than ever because the last few days he's been building his government coalition, and he's been building his government coalition with a lot of center-right, far-right capitalists that I've seen a lot of people complain about. They're like, "Yo, we don't like this Lula," right? That's a legitimate complaint on Lula. That's, I think, legitimate. The people who say stuff like Lula is a CIA cutout, Lula is a U.S. puppet, that's where you lose me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's clear. It's clear who was the U.S. cutout. Bolsonaro was the U.S. cutout. There was no benefit for the U.S. to pick Lula over Bolsonaro. And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. I'm going a little bit out of order. I'm gonna show you guys what I mean by this.
Before you put up. Oh, are you? If you already have it up, go ahead.
I've been
because this. I don't know if this is the right. It sounded like because you were kind of alluding to part of this. This part right here. Let's catch the communists. This is some of the stuff that you're hearing from the police down there. I don't know if you were gonna. I don't know if I.
No. I'm glad you shared it.
That's
great. That's great.
But so they have the Spanish translation, and it's right here. It says fanatics block traffic near. I can't even say that Congonhas Airport in Sao Paulo, calling on patriots to get your asses off the couch and fight for your children. The ever radicaling right is calling for the extermination of communists, and everyone shrugs it off. And this is it. I just searched this, so this is what on the ground.
I'm glad you shared this because this is very relevant.
Dia 6 de janeiro, cadê vocês, patriotas? É a hora, é agora. Tira a bunda do sofá. Vem. A gente fechou tudo aqui, ó. Vamos até o aeroporto. Vamos fechar tudo. Tire a bunda do sofá e vem pra rua. Não seja frouxo. Lute pelos seus filhos. Eu tô aqui lutando pela minha filha. Não seja um patriota frouxo. Seja homem. Copa do Catar! Catar os comunistas! Copa do Catar!
Yeah, that's
to me that just has an eerie CIA connection to me. I don't have any evidence, but it's
it's true.
Why are you saying that specifically? Like, why are you saying that? Seems very suspicious to me. Go ahead, Nick.
So in 1964, you had the military coup that was launched against João Goulart. Hopefully I'm saying that correct. Yeah. And this is a time where Brazil democracy was already kind of fragile. But what Goulart did, he made a giant mistake of trying to do an ambitious land reform and give a ton of natural resources to Brazil's illiterate population. He was going to expand education, give people access to read, give access to people to food, and kind of nationalize their industries. Giant mistake. The CIA, the UK said, you guys not doing that shit. And all of a sudden they coup their government and installed hardcore anti-communist, class loyal bourgeoisie people in charge. And they have been entrenched in Brazilian politics ever since then. So Bolsonaro and the far-right fascist regime in Brazil can link their political origins to the fascist uprising backed by the United States, which is why Bolsonaro is extremely close with the United States and the UK businesses. And I want to show you guys this. Here's, to your point of Bolsonaro supporters being fascist, what they are. The people who think the Bolsonaro element is the populist element, no, they are not. A lot of them are literally Hitler, Nazi supporters. Like, here's the side hell that Bolsonaro supporters do all the time. And this is one of the scenes that was grabbed. This guy said, I like this tweet. He said, I don't know much about Brazilian politics, but these are apparently Bolsonaro supporters, and so I know what side I'm on, right? And I knew about Bolsonaro for a long. He was a weak president. You guys know he was a very weak. Brazilian institutions stopped him from doing a lot of stuff you really wanted to do, like completely privatize the rainforest, have a complete genocide of the indigenous people. He and his supporters wanted him to go further than he was already going. This is a real problem. And these are the people in Brazil that are hardcore Zionists. I'm going to show you guys that here soon. They're hardcore supporters of the Nazis in Ukraine. That's why it's silly to believe that the Bolsonaro was the populist wing, which I heard my communists say before. I hear dumb people say this before. They're not the populists. And this is a great tweet by Hassan. Some people believe Lula is a CIA asset. I don't believe that. The fact that Bolsonaro went to the U.S. after he lost the election tells me he was a CIA asset, not Lula. He is probably watching the current CIA coup attempt in Brazil with the CIA handlers in Florida. And you have Lula, who want to expand on trade with China, who want to expand BRICS, who stand up for the Palestinian people. So I'm not seeing that. And we can have criticism of Lula, but it got to be grounded in reality so we can be effective against them if he lies to us. Like Josana said, there's literally communists and anarchists in Brazil that is watching Lula like a hawk. We are not letting them off, but we got to understand that there is a clear militaristic, violent effort in the South American right-wing politics to oppose what Lula wants.
Do we not know, or has it not been confirmed that it's the CIA? I mean, there's U.S. backs down there.
It's one of the things was not confirmed, but 100%. 100%.
Because I was gonna say this is CIA.
I would say that. So not
written all over. And think about this, Nick. When we covered him being elected, we was like, nobody's covering this shit. Nobody's tweeting about it. Nobody was saying nothing. Like I think Joe Biden said something, but all of a sudden, when this coup attempt happened, Morning Joe is all of a sudden Lula's friend saying democracy down there. Like, you guys are telling on yourself. You said nothing about his election, but now you're talking about this. This is to cover your ass. Like, see, we have nothing to do with this. It's so telling. Go ahead.
What they also do, whenever they did mention Lula election, they would mention it without talking about what he was running on, what Bolsonaro represents. They would be very, very like, oh my God. And CJ, well, I also know this, they're very good at their propaganda. They will say stuff like, Trump friend, Bolsonaro lost the election. That's how they covered it. Trump back, Bolsonaro lost. This is a big blow to Trumpism without ever bringing the fact that Lula want to increase relationship with China. They never brought the fact that Lula was directly critical of Zelensky in Ukraine. They don't say that staunch Palestinian allies Lula won. They would say stuff like this. They'll say the far right, Trump back, Bolsonaro lost. So there'll be all these missing parts. You guys want to know another missing part that they don't talk about? And this is another reason why it's ridiculous to say the West wanted Lula over Bolsonaro. This is literally from late last year. The UK spent millions pushing Bolsonaro to privatize Brazil's oil and gas. And they gave him a lot of money. because Bolsonaro promised to sell off more state-owned companies if reelected this weekend. You guys want to know what one of the first things Lula did when he took office? Undo privatization. That's a big deal. That's a big deal for the average Brazilian. This is why Brazilian communists and socialists made this hard decision. CJ, what do we say all the time? If you're voting for the Democratic Party, there is no benefits you're getting like this. There's no tangible differences. There's tangible differences between the extreme far-right fascists in Brazil that love Zionism, that was literally trying to destroy the rainforest, the lungs of the world. They literally trying to sell out state property, versus Lula, who want to address poverty, who want to end privatization, and he want to expand BRICS. He is calling out Western aggression against Iran, which causes the Western media to smear Lula, and they say, oh, Lula is pro-Iran. Once again, it's got a lot of criticism of Lula. Like, for example, his coalition he's building government is too far right for a lot of our liking. But we can be intellectually honest and have to hold those two thoughts at the same time. These is why the differences between what happened in Brazil, and we're going to get back to this. I'll pass to your part of the segment, CJ, here soon, because this is the differences. Despite the Democrats trying to sell this at a new January 6th, there have been a long-term standing trend, like, for example, going back to 1964, going back with the CIA and U.S. elements backing Bolsonaro the first time, the media doing defense for Bolsonaro and his government imprisoning Lula when he first time was in prison. It took Glenn Greenwald, an independent journalist, to help get Lula freed. Yeah, Western media going along with this stuff. So there's a clear difference here. And the people who just say, oh my God, they're just like January 6th, that they are being ridiculous. They're being absolutely ridiculous, because January 6th was a bullshit publicity stunt. It was a publicity stunt that gone wrong. A bunch of rednecks was entrapped by the police and trapped by the politicians. Meanwhile, there have been a long-standing militaristic resistance against left-wing politics in Brazil that got Lula supporters killed, indigenous people killed. Police and military was actively pro-Bolsonaro. These are giant differences. But anyway, go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, we're not going away from the story. We're just now gonna move to other parts of the story.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just. I do want to get a couple of other kind of videos in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not sharing yet. Here, just more of kind of like what's happening, like visual footage. It's not really them talking. Here's one right here. President Lula condemns the coup attempt and acts of terrorism carried out. He declares that no crime committed today will go unpunished. And I don't think you didn't play this video. You can kind of hear. I'll turn the sound down and read it to everybody. You probably saw the barbarism. My bad, everybody. Let me slow this down. You probably saw the barbarism that took place in Brasília today. Those people that were called fascists, those that are everything that is abominable in politics, they invaded the seat of government, they invaded the Congress, and they invaded the Supreme Court. A true vandals destroying everything they found in front of them. We believe that there was a lack of security. And I want to tell you that all of the people who did this will be found and punished. We will also find out who financed these vandals that went to Brasília. We will find out who financed them. And all of them will pay with the force of the law for the responsibility for all these anti-democratic acts and for these acts of vandalism and fascism. I'm going to read a decree and I am signing into law, federal intervention, public security of federal district until January 31st. So that's one video.
I want to share. You mind if I share this real quick?
Yeah, do that. Yeah, go ahead.
It's right based on what you were sharing, because I want. This is kind of what I was referring to earlier of Lula calling out the police. It said Lula condemns barbarism and criticizes police following attack on political buildings. The police didn't do anything at all. They just let the protesters in. Now imagine Joe Biden saying this. Imagine a progressive saying that. Nobody said this. You guys see how they were calling out because there's a legitimate difference here between the role that the police and military serves. And then Lula said there's elements in our police that we can't even trust anymore now. And this is the Supreme Court order where they removed Brazilia's governor because they felt like they was complicit. You guys see the difference where in America they went after and entrapped ordinary people, ordinary dumbasses, I guess.
Nick,
Brazil, they're going after the top, right? But go ahead, CJ.
The difference, Nick, is our fascists are the ones that's in the government.
Yeah.
The difference in their coup, their fascists is on the outside trying to get in, and you see how the fascists here who are in the government, Nick, are all trying to act like they're part of it. This is the psyop here. This is why it made it suspicious to me. I'm like, Morning Joe is shouting out Lula for this shit. I'm like, oh, hell no. If Morning Joe's doing it, I'm like, ain't no way. You trying to tell me the top propagandist, the one who speaks directly to the ruling class, is all of a sudden down with Lula? I was like, oh no. So they're all projecting as to seem like the United States is not behind this. Is what they're doing, and that's that's sort of what I got from it. But I also wanted to say, chime in on why would AOC? Oops, this is the wrong one. Why is AOC chiming in on this? And let me bring AOC and actually other people, but we're gonna start with Danny Haifang's tweet here. It's a couple of tweets we'll cover for this story. Here goes Danny H. Danny, friend of the show. Check out the Left Lens and his work on Black Agenda Report. Bolsonaro supporters. Go ahead.
Can I share this tweet just real quick and I'll pass it right back to you? Because I think this is
do that.
I'll just got one and I'll pass it right back to you because this is exactly what we was referring to. This is a great tweet by the Squirrel on Twitter. Events like today in Brazil don't just randomly happen. They are allowed to happen by police and intelligence services who treat these fascist mobs like tourists who can do whatever they want. These institutions need to be purged. These institutions need to be purged from fascist sympathizers. And then they talk about how in the Bolivia coup, as I noted after the Bolivia coup, the first responsibility of a left movement after taking power is to purge the police, military, and intelligence institutions. And this is what we call for on this show. Why you guys think we call for a boss in the CIA, the FBI? The reason why we're doing this is because we're gonna have a revolution and we're gonna keep these institutions in power. How does that make sense? But this is the real reason I want to pull this tweet up because this is what we mentioned earlier. This is Hugo Chavez talking about how the Israeli apartheid state funds and support far-right fascists, anti-socialist, and anti-left movements all over the world, including in Venezuela. And you also see it in Brazil with Bolsonaro and his faction being extremely Zionist. You guys see what makes up of the Bolsonaro faction? But go ahead, CJ. I just want to share that. I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, it's I just have a similar, just a couple of different tweets, but let's start with AOC's tweet here.
Jesus!
And this is where I begin to go, wait a minute, what are they saying about? Because remember, or maybe were you in that stream? Oh no, it was me, Rome, and JB when this was going on. When this was breaking news, it was during the stream because people, and Zoya was one of them. She was in the chat and she was like, breaking news, coup attempt happening right now in Brazil. So I knew what was happening. But when I got out, off the stream, Nick, I did not expect to see people like AOC and Joe Biden and like John Fetterman does it too, shouting out to Lula. I was like,
you remember we covered this when Lula first won, when Lula won.
Yes.
When Lula won, you had a bunch of these. You had AOC who never tweeted about Lula. She knows nothing about his politics. And then she was like, oh, congratulations, Lula. Lula, who's extremely critical of NATO, who said we should pursue peace in Ukraine. Lula, who wanted a deepen relationship with China. You had the squad who voted for weapons to Taiwan. The squad who's explicitly anti-China. John Fetterman literally said in the debate that China is our biggest foreign policy threat. Lula want to work with China, but those same people was like, congratulations, Lula. Thank you. These people had no idea who Lula was. No idea about the politics. They had no idea how different they are than someone who's not even that far left. Lula not even that far left. That is how far gone they are. But go ahead, CJ, because you're on the same path that I wanted to go on this part.
Yeah, because so I'm good. So good. I wasn't feeling by myself. So nearly 2 years to the day, the U.S. Capitol was attacked by fascists. We see fascists moving abroad attempt to do the same in Brazil. We must stand in solidarity with Lula's democratically elected government. This is like not necessarily projection, but there's a lot of things in this tweet I want to address. So nearly 2 years to the day, do you think it's a coincidence that this is happening January 9th? Do we think there just happens to be a visually similar thing, that insurrection that happens in Brazil by these far-right person who just was in the news a few days ago, how he's chilling in Orlando? Do we all just think this is all coincidences? That's the first thing. Do we think that's a coincidence? It's not a coincidence that this is it gives the United States politicians the ability to do just this. And this is what I have to say, Nick, about propaganda. It's not telling you directly. It's setting the conditions for this tweet to be believable. It's setting the conditions. You see, what do you mean? It's not just us. Look, it's happening in Brazil. Now, what if they just staged this just so the United States can do whatever they're going to do about January 6th? Because something coming. There's some sort of right or privacy that's going to be away from the United States. Go ahead.
And I mentioned this earlier. It's known that Steve Bannon has a lot of influence on the Brazilian right, and there are a lot of right-wing figures that was grooming the dumb Bolsonaro supporters to do this. The same way you had the Brazilian police guide them to the area. The Brazil police taking literally selfies with them. The governor, who's now been was taken away. Yeah, you can definitely see why there was a vested interest in making this happen. And there are people who are, I've seen a lot of dum-dums. So I see a lot of Bolsonaro supporters or American right-wingers, because there are a lot of like these right-wing populists that I've seen who pretend that Bolsonaro was they're clowns. They were trying to pretend that Bolsonaro was the populist support. So they would say, oh my God, this is a false flag. There's actually Lula supporter that was there here to make Bolsonaro look bad. And the reason why they said that because this make Lula stronger than ever. Because now you have right-wing elements in Brazil that are distancing themselves from Lula after this, despite the fact there was a large coalition of right-wingers in Brazil that was like, oh my God, this whole election is not real, is not legitimate. We're going to have a military take over. A lot of them directly calling for that as well. So I think a lot of U.S. media are just taking advantage of this because they need to sell January 6th. So they see this. The Democrats are like, let's use this to sell January 6th. And the Republicans are like, let's use this to tell people that the liberals are still in the elections on the global scale. So you see how this benefits both class. I think that's how we approach it, because we're very critical in our analysis, like in terms of what side benefit from what. Like, why would, like, we ask the question of why instead of just saying it out loud.
Right.
I think that's what you're doing as well. So that's all I have. But go ahead, CJ. I'll pass it to you. I got more.
Here's John Fetterman's tweet right here. Now this is John Fetterman, Mr. Israel, Mr. I fund Israel, whatever they need.
Yeah, and he hates China. He hates China with. Remember, I know I said it before, but in the debate with Dr. Oz, he was asked, "What is the biggest foreign policy threat?" And he said, "China." I covered it when it happened. That's who John Fetterman is, and that guy is pretending that he's standing in solidarity with Lula. Get the fuck! You see how
he's. My bad. Go ahead.
I was like, you see how and if you look at the tweet, I think you get into this as well.
Yes,
they use this to sell January 6th. They don't give a fuck about Lula. That's what
look who he's quote tweeting. This is what I was gonna say. Of all people, he's quote tweeting Anthony Blinken.
I didn't see that part. I didn't see it.
I was trying to keep it low so you couldn't see it. I was trying to keep it low so you couldn't see the Anthony Blinken's name.
DJ,
how are you quote tweeting the State Department clown in support of Lula? This is the guy who's orchestrating what's happening. What you talking about? This is laughable clown shit. This is what this tells me is that John Fetterman is just tweeting to support Democrats, whatever they're saying. He has no he has no clue of what's going on here. So that's what that tells me.
I also want to add another element. This is something I was thinking about when I was going through these stories. Since look at this tweet. Keep the tweet up. Because you guys know I gotta do a little decolonization of your minds here. We condemn the attacks on Brazil's presidency, Congress, and Supreme Court today. Using violence to attack democratic institutions is always unacceptable. We join Lula in urging an immediate end to these actions. And this is why you see a lot of liberals, including one of the most violent men who has a government position in the world. Anthony Blinken is the most violent. Yes. Like, God, I want you guys to really start thinking about war crimes this way. Think about state violence this way, as if it was an individual crime, right? Anthony Blinken, Obama, Joe Biden, these people are the most violent people that hold government office in the world. Meanwhile, look at the message they sent to us, though. You should never use violence to attack democratic institutions. But they use violence on us all the time. It's called tear gas. It's called rubber bullets. It's called a baton. You got to see how never ever use violence this way, but we will use violence to you. We will bomb a country. We will send weapons. We will use weapons to go to war with Russia because we don't want to negotiate peace. So violence is always the answer for them. But they're using this opportunity to say, you guys see how you guys should never, ever use violence. You guys should stay civil. That is another way to look at it. I know that's slightly off topic, but that's another way to look at this tweet. But go ahead, CJ.
No, what I want to do is break down this lawyerly statement and how he's really not even... So let me say this. So we condemn the attacks on Brazil's presidency, Congress, and state court today. Now, do you understand? He's not saying anything about Lula at all. He's saying he condemns the attack on the presidency, the Congress, the office of the presidency. He's not mentioning Lula specifically.
That's a good point.
Because he's literally writing a tweet about January 6th, and he's just tagging Lula. This is a January 6th tweet. Yes. Go ahead.
I says, but to your point, remember how I said these people are deeply institutionalists? They have no ideology. They just care about upholding the institution. That is it. So that's a good point. I didn't really think about that before. They're not sad about Lula. They're like, oh my God, how dare you attack the Brazilian institution that allows someone like a Bolsonaro to exist? They love those institutions.
And he says it in the next sentence. He says it. He doesn't say the word institution in the first sentence, but that's what he's describing. He lists institutions. Then this is all about January 6th. Using violence to attack democratic institutions is always unacceptable. Why wouldn't you say just it's unacceptable? Because he's applying this to us. Always is not even needed here. To attack democratic institutions. We join Lula. Now, he doesn't say we join Lula and keeping him in office. Look what he says here. We join Lula in urging an immediate end to those actions. This does not say we aren't behind the coup. This doesn't say this at all. This is so carefully written right here. And then we have the clown car of progressive politicians quoting that guy, John Fetterman. Just astonishing, Nick. Got a couple other ones here. Now, when you say the point you had about John Fetterman and China, what was that point again, Nick? What did he say? What was a big thing that he said about China?
I'm pretty sure there was a clip. CJ's gone, but there was a clip where John Fetterman essentially was asked on the debate. Let me see if I can find it. What was the biggest foreign policy threat? He said China. I'll dig it up when I get a chance while we wait for CJ to come back. But I want to show you guys some breaking news. I want Bolsonaro. Oh, there's CJ.
Yeah.
Bolsonaro is in the hospital now. This shit is getting even more ridiculous.
Wait. Oh, I thought that was a joke. He's really in the hospital?
I was hesitant to report on it as well, but I see this in Reuters because I saw a lot of people tweeting about it.
Okay.
Bolsonaro in hospital. Oh man, that dude is the sickest dude ever. How is he still alive, dude? If you guys don't know, Bolsonaro was in the hospital so many times. He was near death so many times throughout the course of the presidency. Like he had colon issues, intestine issues. He had, I think, COVID real bad. Like, so anyway, this is funny. I was just saying this while I was waiting for you to come back. I just saw this. But anyway, you can finish your thought.
Yeah, so
earlier.
let me show you a couple of more tweets because I did tweet about these clowns.
The China thing. You were asking about the China thing. I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Yeah, the China thing about John Fetterman. That was the last thing I was asking you because to me it's almost like he doesn't have an ideology. I'm for Israel. I'm against China. I'm against Russia and for Ukraine. And now in this instance he's for Lula. It's like he's just like everywhere. It's almost like he's not guided by any sort of
this guy is not thinking about
ideology.
Anything. He ain't thinking about anything. This man just taking it whatever directions of the Democratic Party. I wish I could find a live stream. I found the tweet I did, but I can't. I gotta find a video where he said it was his debate. I gotta find it was his debate against Dr. Oz. It was a foreign policy segment, but it was crazy. There also a quote I saw where he said it's absolutely ridiculous to talk about defunding the police. So John Fetterman, like all these puppets in the suits, they're not driven by ideology. They're the actor, and they get directions from the party, and they follow those directions as we see from the members of the squad. But go ahead, CJ.
And you got Hakeem Jeffries. I mean, this guy has been now he's a leader, and I see his tweets more. Like he seems very low intellect. Like he's literally just somebody just giving him instructions. There's no way that brain. Yeah, there's no way that brain contains any sort of level of level of intellect at all.
Leader. Like he's had no charisma. He's just repeating Democratic Party lines. And once again, they were just using this Brazilian attack to sell January 6th. There's not going to be any complicated analysis. There's not going to be any discussion how U.S. companies and U.K. companies will propping up Bolsonaro because they wanted to privatize the area. No, there's going to be no conversation about U.S. media being complicit. And there's still a lot of people in Brazil to this day. And one of the reasons why there are a lot of Bolsonaro people that radicalize that believe Lula is this super corrupt politician was free because Brazil is this corrupt communist state. And that was complete. And U.S. media and complicit Brazilian media helped with that. And if you guys don't know, Glenn Greenwald and many other great journalists helped free Lula because they proved that those charges were propped up by Bolsonaro to imprison him and the far-right government. So you guys see how these things are fundamentally different than the fucking pillow fight, political theater that happened on January 6th. Nigga, there were no stakes there. In Brazil, Lula was fucking imprisoned by Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro offensively used his militaristic police force to go after activists. We talking about two different countries with two different political realities, but Hakeem Jeffries, AOC, and the Democrats are like, oh my God, see, Brazil had their own January 6th. You guys see how they dumb everything down? And I promise you, if you tune into TYT and a conspirator who cultivates the dumb left, watch them. I guarantee you they're about to say the same damn thing. It's coming.
Bolsonaro goes to hospital when he has indigestion. The guy is a drama queen. Wow. Yeah. Here is Hakeem Jeffries' tweet. The violent attack on the heart of Brazilian government by right-wing extremists is a sad but familiar sight. We stand with the people of Brazil and democracy. This is literally a sentence. That first sentence, he's describing the United States, the January 16th, and he just substitute Brazilian government here because he's clearly saying the violent attack on the heart of the Brazilian government by right-wing extremists. You understand they're using sentences that can be interchanged with January 6th. That's
Yeah.
on purpose. That's literally what I'm getting at. Go ahead, Nick.
And people like AOC and King Jeffries, they tweet this out. So a lot of dum-dums like, oh my God, see, they like Lula. They must be progressive. They must be hip. But look at what the tweet. This is a lie. This is what we should remind every single Democrat who tweets this. Look at the last part of the tweet. We stand with the people of Brazil and democracy. Since when do you guys stand for democracies in Latin America? As Venezuela, you guys literally invited Juan Guaido to speak at Congress. So whenever you hear Democrats bring this up, no, you guys literally intervened in a democratically elected government in Venezuela. Was silent when Bolsonaro waged his offensive attacks against the indigenous people. You guys do not stand with democracy. You're virtue signaling, and this is why people hate liberals in the Democratic Party. That is what they're doing. They're taking a real thing that happened in Brazil and trying to make it about their fucking bullshit political theater January 6th.
Yeah,
right,
and the thing is, and you're not seeing this from you're not seeing this from Republicans, of course, because they're not down with the January 6th hearing. But to see Democrats do this sort of trying to confuse people about what's happening in Brazil and what happened here as if it's similar. I'll take this down. I think I'm done showing it. The tweet. It's just what I find disturbing, Nick, and it just goes in line with what has been happening with progressives, is that progressives, people who other progressives call progressives, are participating in it, and that was AOC. They are participating. Like, it's one thing to go, I'm part of the Democratic Party, but it's another thing to go, I'm going to go and be one of the sales pitch people to sell all this garbage that they're selling. Like, that's a whole different another level that, to me, that should be cancelable as socialists. That should be cancelable as leftist people who are looking to politicians. There needs to be something that cancels a politician. And we've been saying they've hit a bunch of those things, and there's the professional managerial class that's saying no, they haven't, like Mike Figueiredo. But just seeing one thing after another coming from these progressives is disheartening for me. And to see that from AOC is like, there's literally no need. All you could have just said, I stand with Lula, like what Ilhan did. Remember, she got elected and she refused to say anything but happy he was elected. It was like, good luck, Lula, and that was it. But for this, you got a whole lot of propaganda to insert. It's like they're completely gone. There's no more people. There's no more squad. There's none. Go ahead. Not even the fake narrative is what I'm saying. There's not even that anymore. Go ahead.
They're literally imperialists. They're imperialists. And to wrap up the Brazilian segment, I'll just read this part here, and this is why this will always be fundamentally different. I'll explain this at the beginning of the stream. Brazil is a country that, like all Latin American countries, have been victim to colonial influence. And I'm not talking about just direct violence influence. I'm talking about the most extreme elements of their society was propped up by the West, because the most extreme elements of their society is more willing to sell out public land. They're more willing to sell out the capitalists in order to instill their ideology. You guys understand? That's why they take advantage of our social conservative movements, because, hey, if we can instill our socially conservative ideology in our government, we don't care if we sell our lands to Western companies. So just so we can have a moment of learning here, this is why this is big, because there's a history of right-wing violence influenced by Western-style intervention. And this is why you had Steve Bannon and a lot of right-wing elements that were trying to spur Bolsonaro's supporters into doing this. Let me read this real quick and wrap this up. Britain's hidden hand in Brazil's 1964 coup d'etat. And they talking about how UK helped the US by providing covert propaganda. That's just what they're saying here. And they helped install the brutal 21-year-old military dictatorship. And by the way, this military dictatorship, Bolsonaro served in. You guys know that? So the right-wing fascists that's in Brazil, they can mark their lineage directly to this military dictatorship that have used violence to take over and maintain political power before. And now they are following tradition. They're not bullshit January 6th hysteria. This is real shit that changed governments in Brazil. I'll just read first two paragraphs here. They talk about how in March, a military coup was launched against João Goulart. Brazil's democracy was already fragile, and then Goulart was doing the land reform. This is what I explained earlier. While standing the vote to Brazil's illiterate population, that incensed the country's political, military, and business elite. So you had the business elite and the military and the political elite that was against him for spreading the ability to vote and having agendas and policies that helped the average proletariat in Brazil. So that led to the military coup. And that led to the military dictatorship, where over 400 individuals were killed by the Brazilian military, and many more were disappeared, tortured, or imprisoned. And then they talk about how Washington D.C., the United States hand in the coup is well known. The CIA began pouring money into the country covertly, so they wasn't telling people. So this is why we are allowed to ask these questions, and you're not called a conspiracy theorist if you do, when we say we think the CIA is involved. Because whenever the CIA is involved, people at the time don't know. You guys understand?
Yeah, it's always later.
It's always later. In a few years, you're like, damn, the CIA actually played a role in the Bolsonaro coup attempt in Brazil. So
what we do is say, let's use our critical thinking skills and see if there's any signs, any sort of a United States coup MO that's all on the handprints of this, and all of the leaders and corporate media all projecting to Lula about this is a key tip-off point to me.
Absolutely.
It's a key tip-off point.
Absolutely.
For me, go ahead.
You're 100% right. And that's why I'm going to do the exact opposite approach, where I'm assuming the CIA to prove otherwise. Whenever I see, especially far right, like when I see the same pattern of far right people escalating violence in the country, that's literally what the United States done in Latin America for years.
Overthrowing people. Come on, let's be serious. Who else is overthrowing people, Nick? Who else, Nick? Like literally, there's not an overthrowing happening without the CIA either being like consulted on, because they train all the other corrupt people. Like, come on, man. Let's this what we have to get the proletariat is out to start thinking innocent to proven guilty for your country, for your government. Stop thinking that.
They deserve no benefit of doubt.
Proven innocent. It's guilty to proven innocent for your government. For this government, for this imperialist government. Like, that's literally the way we should do it.
Absolutely true. So I can wrap the segment there. CJ, I have a really quick segment.
Let's do it.
This segment should be very quick.
I do have a quick one too, so maybe we can do these quick ones real quick.
Yeah, let's do a few rapid fire before we sign off. So I'm gonna start this segment this way, Aaron. The shift in the Overton window has been insane to watch. Like I've been an anti-war activist, and that's been my number one political issue before I was a socialist. I explained it so many times. I voted for the Green Party in 2016. I had no idea what the eco-socialist was back then. I was like, oh, damn, Jill Stein is base as hell. She's talking about the wars. She's talking about ending the war. She called it the war machine. That's why I voted Green. Then Marxism and socialism just so happened to align with me at that point. And then the fact that I saw socialists and Marxists be anti-war, that also helped. I was like, oh shit, all the people who are anti-war are socialists. That's a good sign, right? So that's the order of events here. So now we see this part, the Overton window is so messed up because of Bernie Sanders and the squad. And a lot of people who don't have discipline, they see AOC call herself a socialist. And she's like, I like AOC, so I'm a socialist too. Meanwhile, they support NATO. Meanwhile, they support increased military funding. People who now call themselves a socialist, even though they have nothing to do with being anti-war. They have no criticism of the capitalist imperial machine, which is the number one priority of Marxists and socialists to dismantle. You guys know, if that is not your number one priority, you're not a socialist. But these people don't care about none of that stuff, but they call themselves a socialist. Doesn't make any sense. Right now, the strangest thing is the right wing is now rallying behind being anti-war. Now, this is a guy, I have no idea who this guy is. So before you do this shit, like, this guy said this, this guy said, no idea who this guy is. This is a big TikToker. Someone sent this to me, and I want you guys to hear his message and see how weird that this is. They have a NATO left compared to what you're seeing coming out of the right-wing Twitter and TikTok. And you guys will see immediately what I'm talking about when you hear him speak, because he's still a little off. But this is an anti-war message. I spoiled it a little bit. Let me know if the audio is good, CJ.
I got a serious question to all you Trump haters and liberals out here, Biden supporters.
So you can tell he's right-wing because he immediately come out like, oh my God, Trump haters. So he's
culture war. He already
you see his
started
bias.
with, yeah.
Now we're gonna pick apart that later, but I want to watch. Let's watch the whole thing. I'll explain later. So you see he's right-wing. Now listen, when I first read the video, I'm like, why the fuck you send this to me, man? So he starts off extremely rough. Now watch where he takes it though. It's unbelievable.
I got a serious question to all you Trump haters and liberals out here, Biden supporters, those with the mindset of vote blue no matter who. How many of you are ready to fight for your country? You see, you voted for a man out of pure hatred and spite for a different man. But now the man you voted for is about to get us popped off in World War III. I think it's only fair that since you voted for that man, and that man is the one getting us in this mess, that you should be put at the front of the line. You see, until something starts affecting you personally, nothing will change. And I'll be damned if I put my kids in harm's way or danger because some old ass man don't know what the hell he's doing anymore. He doesn't even know what the hell he's saying or who he's shaking hands with. So how many of you are ready to go fight his war?
Bruh, this man is using almost the same argument that leftists used to use. I don't know if you guys remember. We were like, I remember back in the day, like, hey, yo, if you think we can fight the terrorists in Al-Qaeda, how about you sign up? If you want to fight Russians so much, how about you sign up? No, this is a right-winger that is telling the people who voted for Joe Biden, yo, Joe Biden is getting us in all these wars. You little chicken hawk. Why don't you fight in that war? Isn't this extremely, like, detach yourself from political tribalism? If you're someone who not into politics that much and you hear this message, you're generally anti-war, you're like, yeah, I'm riding with this guy, right? This is the right wing has hijacked being anti-war. CJ, you have any thoughts? And
This is what we kind of chimed in on this yesterday with JB in Rome. We're seeing, and also when Rome was with us, we're seeing a real realignment. And I know that E is small in there. That real realignment of U.S. politics. We have the GOP or conservative side now becoming the working class anti-war party, and we have the Democratic Party that is the war mongering, weapons manufacturing, tech oligarch, corrupt. Like it's a complete switching of that. And to me, this switching, this realigning, it should be more reason why we're saying we're not going through the Democratic Party. This is more reason there shouldn't be this attempt to use this party, because the party is becoming worse than the other party, at least in the public eye, like in the case of this anti-war. This is a great video, and I like what he did. He drawed it in. He drew you in with hatred, because the liberals probably, what you got something to say about us? And he drew you in, and then he laid your ass out with some knowledge. He laid you out. That's what he did with that line in the beginning. Go ahead.
Yeah, and let's watch it again just because it's super short. And this guy is someone I would love to talk to. The reason why is because he put this anti-war message, but he's still a Trump apologist. These are the people I love talking to. Like, you're anti-war, but you like Trump? You know he increased the military budgets, funded the genocide in Yemen. He literally vetoed ending the genocide in Yemen. He tried to coup Venezuela. He funds the apartheid state of Israel. So these are the people I would love to pick your brain. Your message is good. Drop the two-party duopoly. That's the only part of his message that turns people off. Like, if he didn't say that Trump shit,
if he didn't
and he came out like an ordinary person, like, hey, liberals, you're voting for war. Why don't you fight that war? This message would be 100% more influent. Much more
it's the same thing. It's the same thing that we suggested with, I think with Jose, with the protest with AOC. If he just took out Tulsi, like, they have no attack. They have no attack. They have to address the policy.
Now you got to see why I'm covering
and with this person, the same sort of thing. Like, even if he's a Trump supporter, if he just edited out that first 10 seconds, they would have nothing to say about the substance.
Yeah, now you got to see why I wanted to cover this as well. The message of RBN is to drop the two-party duopoly. Like, if you're seriously anti-war, why are you propping up any of those parties? That's my message to this guy as well. This message is not as effective as you think it is, guy, if you're supporting Trump. That's why, RBN, we got to be militant about this, whether we talk to Republicans or Democrats. You are not serious about whatever message you're saying. You won't be influential. You won't win people over unless you tell them to drop the two-party duopoly. So let's watch it again, then we can do one more critical analysis, and then we can do the next segment. Like I said, it shouldn't be a long segment, this one.
I got a serious question to all you Trump haters and liberals out here, Biden supporters.
See, he literally should literally take the first 4 seconds off.
Right there.
Really start, and for all the liberals and Biden supporters out there, why do you have to put the first part there? Yeah. I'm sure this guy is a social media influencer, so he's trying to win over Trump likes. So I think he feel like he had to say that to get MAGA people. But you guys see how the two-party duopoly hinders,
or he's really just calling out those people, or he really feels like he's calling out those people. Stop, or he's doing what he's basically calling out the fake woke people. Stop acting like you fake woke anti-left people. So he's doing it in a way, not calling them anti-woke. So I guess that's a good thing. I guess he's doing that. That's a good thing. Yeah. But he's just pointing out you guys aren't left. I thought, what's going on here? So I mean, these contradictions that maybe these sort of political contradictions or these realignments are going to get bigger and bigger, and we as Marxists have to point these contradictions out all the time. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, let's finish it, and I'll give my last thoughts on this.
Those with the mindset of vote blue no matter who. How many of you are ready to fight for your country? You see, you voted for a man out of pure hatred and spite for a different man. But now the man you voted for is about to get us popped off in World War III. I think it's only fair that since you voted for that man, and that man is the one getting us in this mess, that you should be put at the front of the line. You see, until something starts affecting you personally, nothing will change. And I'll be damned if I put my kids in harm's way or danger because some old ass man don't know what the hell he's doing anymore. He doesn't even know what the hell he's saying or who he's shaking hands with. So how many of you are ready to go fight his war?
Now, I'm assuming this gentleman, because he looks like he's black or at least part black. He does have some African features. So I'm assuming that now this is part of the black men that's leaving the Democratic Party and saying fuck you and going to the conservative side. And this is the lane being opened up by the Congressional Black Caucus because they're not doing nothing, by the Hakeem Jeffries because they're coons, by the Jamal Bowmans because they sell out immediately, and it's despicable. Those are my last words. Your last thought on that?
I just want to share this because it's just wild, the shift in the Overton window. The same messaging that anti-war activists used for a long time. If you guys support these politicians, support war, how about you sign up instead of supporting the war hawks and then sending other people's kids to die? Last thought is I hope this guy doesn't have any plans to vote for Ron DeSantis. Because guess who want to go to war with China more than anyone? I would easily flip this on him. Like, if you're conservative and you want to vote for Ron DeSantis, you better put up or shut up. You got to fight that war on China. You better fight that war on Russia. You better fight them wars in South America. This has always been the talking point of anti-war activists, to put the onus on. This is what you guys are voting for. We know people are not actually going to sign up, but it's to wake people up. You're literally voting for mass destruction, and you're not even taking accountability for it. You won't even fight for the same wars that your politicians advocate for. But anyway, we can wrap the segment there. CJ, any quick stories you have?
Yeah, I do have at least one.
I got a story I'm gonna save for tomorrow. I think it'll be longer.
Yeah. So my story is this. I did have another one because the Joe Biden immigration Haitian story, the preventing of asylum. We got to cover that. Like we have to cover that, and maybe.
That was one of the stories I was going to cover. And I was like, "Oh, that's too long. I might have to cover it tomorrow."
Yeah, no. I was just about to say. I was just about to say that's too long. I was just about to say I want to give more time to that one. So let's push that one to maybe Wednesday. If it can't be part of tomorrow, we can push it to Wednesday. And then we're gonna keep pushing these Twitter files so we cover it because it's simply too good information for us not to cover it. So the Twitter files we're gonna cover. But I felt like this one could be kind of quick. Maybe Twitter files could be quick too. This one right here is the quicker one, I think. Breaking points, murder in the comments. This is pretty quick because we can just bring up the. Yeah, this is a good one. So the other story, the Twitter files. We're gonna Nick and CJ. Everybody wants us to get to it. Nick and CJ show will eventually get to the Twitter files. So we're gonna get to that, and we're gonna get to the Haitian Biden administration basically having the same immigration policy as the Trump administration. But we had to cover these comments right here. So here's the video. Breaking Points put out a video, and this is Crystal's very rare sort of, what do they call them, radars that she has that's any worth watching. And this one is titled GOP Rebellion, Fake Populist Revolt. This is what she chose, the angle that the professional managerial class on Breaking Points decided to go with. Now, before we listen to a minute or so, let's just go directly to the comments.
Let's review, and also it's very interesting, like what Crystal admits while doing this radar here, because I stumbled on this earlier today because I was like, I wonder if she's gonna bring up the fact that because when I saw fake all this stuff, like, are you gonna bring up the term limits? You know, decreasing the military budget, you know, the real win. So I saw her radar. I was like, wow, she's omitting a lot of information here. So I wonder, like, all right, we called out Breaking Points months and months ago. People was like, oh, you guys are just jealous. I'm like, all right, whatever. But now we had Jimmy finally call them out, and he was like laid into them over the whole Ryan Grimm crystal ball thing. And now after that stream that Jimmy did, look at these comments, man. And I've seen this for the last few weeks because I've seen people call them out for the Ukraine coverage as well. I just want to remind you guys, like months ago, like almost a year ago, we told you guys about Breaking Points and how they was shifting to the right and how they was repeating more mainstream media talking points. You guys gonna hear it from Crystal here, where she knows that she has to put a radar condemning the right-wing rebellion.
Yeah. That's how you know she knows she's in the Democratic Party fold. Like, when you know I got to do certain things, I got to talk about January 6th, that's what Marianne Williamson did. You know they're still in that Democratic mode, and there's no getting them out.
Because she has to admit they got concessions while also trying not to point out the obvious that the left should have done that. Right, it's so funny. But anyway, let's read a few. Like we can read like a handful, and then
just a few, and then we'll watch.
So after the video.
So Crystal thinks that her children should pay for her wasteful ideology. That's one. Then we have this one here. Crystal is such a uniparty shield. She defends the squad's lack of action. Her mental mode is coming apart at the seams, and she still refuses to see the writing on the wall. It is obvious why Dora can't stand her. This one, so much for the anti-MSN mainstream media lane.
Yeah. Bro, there's so many, like, guys, and I want to go back to more comments after you watch the video, because there's not a positive one here. You don't see a lot of ones.
Let me just read these last two here.
Yeah, they said they stood up to the party leaders and got some things they wanted. That's more than the squad you keep defending ever did, which is a fact. And now Crystal and this radar is going to explain why the things that they are asking for is anti-populist, right? But they are Republican lawmakers who are advocating for fiscal conservatism. The breakdown is about how these are tactics that work, right? There are tactics that work, and they got legitimate things like term limits, the ability to hold the speaker vote whenever you want. These are giant things. The reduction in military spending, these are giant things, especially to holding him accountable. Because imagine if he breaks this promise and he starts fundraising in primaries where safe primary states. Then they'd be like, oh, yeah, you broke your promise. Let's do a vote of no confidence. That's giant. That is literally what the progressives need. Because now, with that, they won't be able to raise money like they did with Chantel Brown. But then in this video, she's going to pretend, oh, well, this is just another example. This is like the 2010 Tea Party. And I'm not even saying that she's not 100% wrong here, but it's obvious what she's trying to do. Like, she's here to confuse people. She's here to
Nick.
Well, go ahead, CJ. We can play the video after.
Yeah, Nick. So like I asked JB in Rome yesterday. You ever been out and discovered a former friend? At the time, he was your friend. Discover your former friend didn't really have your back. You ever been out somewhere? I'm at a club. I've been out. Fight breaks out. One of the homies disappear. That's essentially what we have, Nick, on the left. We have people in our lane, and we're like, let's go at this. And we have these people who don't want to do it. I'm saying that to say this now. You notice how the professional managerial class is finding every way to tap dance around talking about the specific strategy. They're talking about everything else.
Exactly, CJ.
So it's your friend who, hey, nigga, let's go get these dude at the club. They just stole on me. What? Well, hold on, nigga. Well, what time, nigga? I gotta go to work tomorrow, and it's like, wait, no. They want to talk about everything except for the strategy they don't want to do. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, and after this, we can play a video because it's obvious when you watch this, she does everything possible to deflect from the idea that what they did work. That you got to be hostile toward power, and then will not put what progressives did. But let's watch it. You guys can see why she got a ton of pushback in the comments, because she's here to confuse, and people are starting to get onto that. But let's play the video and then we can react.
Oh, now that the first battle in the great GOP rebellion of 2023 is complete, what the hell was it actually all about? What did the rebels want? What did they win? What will it mean for all of us? After all, at times during the fight, it was actually a little hard to discern exactly what the asks were, what principles were really at stake, especially since the 20 holdouts weren't a united front, but rather a collection of different ambitions and grievances. This confusion was exacerbated by the fact that the two sides were both led by sort of pseudo-Trumpian figures. Kevin McCarthy was directly endorsed by Trump, of course, and had as one of his top allies Marjorie Taylor Greene, woman who has not found a Trump delusion she would not embrace. And the 20 rebels were led by Matt Gaetz, a pugilist whose natural gifts as a genuine asshole have made him a natural for the Trumpian political aesthetic. The media largely treated this fight as if it was something totally.
So what? Oh, I don't know. I thought I had this the right way. My bad, everybody. What she's doing here, we have to discuss what she's doing here. It's like, it's as if we had the Black Panthers coming up, right? And we're going to talk about the strategy they did, the work, and we brought the Black Panthers on the mainstream media, and then we say the Black Panthers, they over here, they broke in, they've been arrested 3 times, and the last week they bombed this other thing. Now let's talk about your strategy, Black Panthers. That's what she's doing. She's saying all this bad stuff about these people before she's about to describe a strategy that she doesn't want to do, and she wants to give cover to the squad. This is so, like, I don't know, why would he call Crystal Ball left again? It's because it's Medicare for all? Is that why she's left? Like, what's left about her besides Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage? What's left about these people? But let's continue, Nick.
Totally new, totally different. And to be sure, we haven't had a speaker fight this lengthy in 100 years. But as the dust settles on this new GOP House majority, it seems to me most of the lines of this fight weren't actually ones set down by Trump in 2016, but by the Tea Party back in 2010 and by the Koch radical libertarian wing and Barry Goldwater before that. Yeah, there are a few Trump-era twists that are new and different, and frankly, these are the only pieces which are interesting and not terrible. The potential defense spending cuts, the deep state investigation, which Sagar is digging into in his monologue. But the overwhelming bulk of the concessions are actually antithetical to Trump's 2016 break from GOP economic orthodoxy. Remember, back then he...
So essentially it was like, other than the anti-war stuff, other than decreasing the military, it's all bullshit. That doesn't you just preface literally just ruin the rest of the argument that you continue to make at this point. But let's continue the video.
No, I was gonna stop it for the same reason. She's basically saying, other than this great huge thing over here, what you guys get? That's basically what she's saying.
Yeah, your premise is not working because you literally brought up the good thing that they got, like the objectively good thing that they got. And remember, the discussion about this, especially coming from the left, because we are against a lot of the fiscally conservative asks that they got, It's about the strategy they use and why the progressives did not use that same strategy. But what she's trying to do, she's trying to muddy the water. Like, yeah, you see how this strategy led to a bunch of bad things?
Right. She's trying to tie.
Go ahead.
She's trying to tie what conservatives want and the things they got to sort of be innately connected to doing the strategy. Like, if you do this strategy, you're gonna end up with some bad stuff. Like, this is the thing that's like the professional managerial class does. It's not like you can say it's an exact lie. Like, this is what Ryan Grimm did. It's like, you're not telling us an exact lie that a worker told. But what you're doing is you're trying to present that as the thing, when your analysis as a leftist should be that this is a sham, or whatever the case may be. I was referring to the first thing, but that's what she's doing here. Let's listen to some more, and then we'll get back to the comments.
And he was the guy who trashed the neoliberal consensus of trade deals and deficit hawks and would-be Social Security cuts. But now with this fight, we're officially back to 2010 with all its hostage taking over spending cuts and demands to slash social spending, including potentially Social Security and Medicare. There's nothing new about these
hostage taking. Like, this is what I mean. Like you're reporting on the story, but all of your adjectives are to demonize what the strategy, Nick. Like, all of her adjectives are to demonize the strategy. And that
the proletariat needs some hostages. We need some hostages. Like, I wish we could find some hostages that we can extract some shit from the pro. Like, that's a good thing, right? But go ahead, CJ. Hostage taking.
These politics, and they sure as hell are not populist. But this is predictably exactly what you get when you have a party that under Trump embraced vibes and aesthetics more than actual political content. Because there are a million DC orgs and billions of dollars ready to fill your empty vessel with the anti-tax, pro-plutocrat, starve the poorest ideology.
And that's why I put my head down. I was like, I can't believe she's saying this.
Well, we can keep it going. We can keep it going, but I just want you guys to know what she just did is it described the squad. So why is the criticism not the squad the same thing? Right? But go ahead, let's continue.
Ideology that has been haunting this town for decades now. Let me be a little bit specific here about these concessions, at least what we know of them and what they ultimately will mean. Remember, since Democrats hold the Senate and the White House, the most critical action in the session is going to be on items where the House and the Senate must actually act together in order to keep the basics of government operating. So basically, the whole game here is the debt ceiling and the government budgeting process. If the debt ceiling doesn't get lifted, economic chaos could ensue. If the government doesn't get funded, it shuts down, with huge ramifications for basic societal functioning. The concessions given by McCarthy make it much more likely that ordinary Americans will suffer because of radical anti-government ideologues. In fact, many of the 20 who are opposing McCarthy were explicit.
You see the language that she's using? The left, what we want from the left members in Congress is to say we have our demands, or we will shut the government down. If you don't want the government to be shut down, you give us our demands. But you gotta see how she said that's anti-government rhetoric. These are the tactics that we have to use. How are we getting decreased police funding? How are we ending the war machine? How are we getting Medicare for all? We do that unless we do the same thing they did that she's demonizing. But go ahead, CJ. I want to
Nick, it's just, so you see, this is Dr. Anthony Montero. You and I broke down the interview that he did with Margaret Kimberly and Danny Haifong a long time ago, where he talked about, he said they're trying to convince us, or they've convinced the black worker that they have more in common with woke white capitalists than the white worker. And it's sort of like that's what she's trying to kind of or that's what we're participating in when we're teaming up with people like the professional managerial class in Crystal Ball. Like, think about what we're doing. We're teaming up with her to fight against white workers. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So the thing that they're saying about populists and what, for example, what these GOP members extracted, think about what she's basically saying, she's not willing to go to the mat for any of the left policies, is what I'm getting at. I said it took a long time to say that, but she's not willing, and the professional managerial class is not willing to go to the mat and they're showing that in their ridicule of this strategy by the right. They're showing that they're not willing to go to the mat. Yeah. They're getting concessions, but we're not willing to do that. Then what are you willing to do? Oh, the PRO Act. Let's vote some progressives in. Like, it's not serious at all. And I'll read that comment. Crystal is just another mainstream media obscurer of reality. And I'm loving our community, Nick, because that came from Shama. I played the video earlier and I played the video yesterday. Obscurers of reality. And that's what these agents of obscurers of reality are doing. The Ryan Grahams, the David Sirotas, and the breaking points. Go ahead.
And they're here to make everything about red game, blue game shit, right? So Crystal, because she's on blue team, is out. She go on here and be like, all right, we're gonna tell you why the Republicans are being big dumb. Meanwhile, what we do, because we care more about the proletariat, we don't give a fuck about the red, blue. We don't care. This is the tactic that they use. It worked, and this is the tactic that we should employ. You guys see how it's just that simple? Meanwhile, she got to jump through hoops to do this red team bag, to twist the story to that, because that's the role that she played. The role that she plays to force people to continue to think in a two-party duopoly manner, just like Saiger as well. He does the same thing. But let's continue the video.
Oh,
or hopefully.
Oh no, I hit the back button by accident. Yeah. I was trying to.
Yeah, it should be in the same spot.
Well,
and I can move it.
It's fine.
A little bit.
I think it was like 2 minutes in. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's somewhere around right here. We were listening.
Let me be a little bit specific here about these concessions, at least what we know of them and what they ultimately will mean. Remember, since Democrats hold the Senate and
a little further
a letter
than
that was sent by 7 of the holdouts last month, they demanded.
Oh yeah, okay. Now I know where she was. She was right about 43. Here we go.
That McCarthy would use the debt ceiling fight to hold the entire nation hostage in the name of fiscal austerity. South Carolina Republican Ralph Norman said that he would never vote for McCarthy until he was willing to shut the government down rather than raise the debt ceiling. He described it as a non-negotiable item. A letter that was sent by 7 of the holdouts last month. They demanded that a debt ceiling showdown occur and that they balance the budget in 10 years. Even if they actually follow through on a defense budget cut, the bulk of the spending cuts are going to come from vital and popular programs, things like Medicare and Social Security, that make up significant chunks of the federal budget. This dramatically unpopular agenda appears to be exactly what the radicals have ultimately won. McCarthy agreed to change the process for passing.
Why is she using the term the radicals won? Like, this is literally corporate media. Corporate media uses the term radicals in the way she just used. Who are these people, Nick? Who is Breaking Points? This is absurd.
Passing spending bills in a way that empowers the most anti-government radicals. He also pledged to send the country into economic crisis rather than lift the debt ceiling with no spending cuts. For the rebels, going to war with DC elites might be popular, but the actual provisions that they were warring over are decidedly not. Republicans know this, by the way. When Rick Scott floated a similar program as head of the NRSC, Republicans who actually wanted to win elections, like Mitch McConnell, trashed him for it, wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Now they're implementing exactly the unpopular agenda that they tried desperately to run away from back then. Additional reported concessions have to do with power. Any single caucus member can now call essentially a vote of no confidence on McCarthy. Powerful rules.
That's a big deal.
Let's put this up. I was going to stop because let's just go over these without her comment on it. But here it goes. Go ahead, Nick. You were going to say something.
Because she keep doing this in this segment. This is why a lot of when you see the comments, you see a lot of people frustrated. Because in the beginning of the segment, she's like, well, other than them decreasing the military budget. And then she's like, well, here's something to ask. For example, you see they can force a vote to overthrow the speaker. And then she moved right past it as if that's not a giant tool that the progressives could have used. Like that, those two loans are big deals. And the term limits that she doesn't bring up. So her strategy in this segment is to highlight all the bad things and ignore the good things on purpose so people can leave thinking, oh, this is what the strategy leads to. And it's obvious to everyone, including Breaking Point's audience, It's super obvious. That's why when you look at the comments, they all calling them out for it. But anyway, I know you
Yeah.
said you want to go over each individual thing, so we can go through it. Changes pay go to cut go. For that, once again, to show example for the Republicans using tactics to get themselves wins. They're fiscally conservative, so they did the strategy, and it was effective, which is why we want the squad to do that. We don't agree to that, but they doing exactly what their constituency wants, right? Constraint debt limit end runs, 3/5 vote to raise tax rates, allow 2-minute votes, 74 hours for bills, dynamic scoring, in labor, education, and workforce, new COVID select committee. Now, when I see this, like it seems like they are looking to reform the process, right? So why is it the Democratic Party have no criticisms over how the process went, right? Anyway, go ahead, CJ.
I think that's intentional. We'll listen to maybe a minute more and then read the comments and
how legislating occurs. That's going to be dominated by hard right Freedom Caucus members. On their own, these provisions aren't really good or bad.
Actually, we can end it here. I'm tired of hearing this nonsense, Nick. But the bottom line is this: what this segment should have been is 10% on the bad stuff and 90% on why the left should use this strategy and list things that we could get. Instead, she's doing 90% demonizing the strategy, and 10% of saying, "Oh yeah, they did this one thing," and then 90% demonizing the strategy. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, it just she spent a whole segment where she easily could have just said, they asked for socially conservative stuff that we don't agree with. That's the segment.
Right.
These are how Republicans govern. There's nothing new. They just did a more effective way of doing it. But the strategy is exactly what the left should do. That is what the political analysis that we should be having on. But what she's trying to do is trying to lead people into believing that these tactics inherently lead to bad things. That's why she glossed over the good things. And hell, don't even bring up the term limit, for example. So you guys can see here, and this guy said, "What's the point? Using leverage is bad." This seems like a pro status quo take. Go on, Crystal. Tell us how your handlers really feel. Now, this is the thing. Like, Breaking Point's audience is starting to see through this, and this is not just R being nitpicky, right?
Definitely not as fake as AOC and the squad. Saying they're not as fake as AOC and the squad, and then this one. They asked for the rule that allow any member to reject the speaker to be restored. Pelosi had removed this rule. Thanks for playing. They're just pointing out she's not pointing out the good things. Here goes another one from Gwen. What about the floor vote argument for term limits? Why didn't you bring it up, Crystal? Just bringing up all the negative of all the stuff that they got deals on in order to run cover for the squad. Very telling and disappointing.
Poor Crystal, go to CNN. glad he kept the squad's feet to the fire during the Dems fight. Crystal sarcasm. Yeah, you guys see everyone see like Breaking Point's own audience, all of them the most like comments. And not like we nitpick, we literally click on the video, you scroll down, all of the most like comments are calling her out.
Or negative.
Yeah.
Here's this one. Look at this one. Because I said the same thing when she mentioned radicals. Every time Crystal says anti-government radicals, I gain years of my life. Because you're
anti-government if you don't go along with the procedures. It's
imagine
crazy.
still supporting the fraud squad. Congratulations, you are definitely on the path of becoming the new mainstream.
Damn. That's a scathing comment considering they don't want to be. They don't want to be. They like, we're different from corporate news, but we're gonna have the same narrative, right? I'll read this one. They wanted not blindly pass bills, look into things, and not just randomly give billions of foreign aid. Checks and balances. So they held out on some agencies, a voice for individual members, and constrained the top-down system that existed. That's about bad how. They literally cut McCarthy and the Speaker of the House rolled down to size. And a lot of people have no idea how powerful the Speaker is. I will make the argument that it's been too powerful. That shit need to be stripped to some power. A lot of people they control everything. They control the what get voted on.
The money, they can monitor community assignments. They control everything that comes to the floor.
The idea that you're gonna elect a Speaker without any ass, that's so absurd to think about, but that's how our government ran for 100 years. Anti-democratic shit.
But that's what they point to as being like some sort of great time in democracy as far as the speakership. This hasn't happened in 100 years. You mean it's been captured for 100 years where the speakership has been just appointed? Is that what you're saying? You're trying to describe as a good thing?
Yeah, this should be the new normal. This should happen every single time that a speaker changes. Like whenever there's a house change, whenever leadership change, there should be massive debate over it. Like the idea that it's not, but you guys want to say the Chinese Communist Party is anti-democratic. You guys are literally the most anti-democratic. They view anointing for someone as democracy. Remember, that's why Hillary Clinton fans hated Bernie Sanders for a very long time, because he got in the way of her being anointed. These people are deeply anti-democratic.
This one says, I thought Breaking Points needed my money so they could stay independent. Seems like my money is paying Crystal to carry water for the squad forced to vote. Why do you refuse to give credit where it's due? Term limit votes. Let's see. Speaker removal, holding Congress feet to the fire to stop the insane money printing. Like, that's all bad.
People don't like when people are taking left and right sides. They see, you can keep that comment. Look, I won't read that one next. But people see that Crystal is repeating the Democratic Party line, and they can't even do what we did. When we have the nuance enough to say, yeah, I do not support the fiscal conservative ass that they got. But we can acknowledge that them forcing a vote on a speaker, term limits, and reducing the military budget is a good thing. She can't even bring herself to do that. And it's red-blue tribalism that affects your political analysis. People are tired of it. People are really tired of it. But anyway, this next comment says, Breaking Points looking more like propaganda every single time. And then the next one said, Crystal contradicts herself so many times in this, in spite of her leaving everything out that went against her narrative. And that was my reaction when I watched it. That was your reaction too, CJ. It's obvious that she was lying by omission. She crafted this by leaving out information that would make her narrative more powerful. And that is what a lot of these boutique lefts do. And
we'll read two more. Go ahead, Nick. If you're gonna say something. We'll read two more. Go ahead.
Yeah, two more. And I know you want to chime in, but this one says, Crystal, what did Trump have to do with any of this? And that's a good point, because the liberal pundits on MSNBC, they keep saying this is an unbelievably Trumpian move. This is a born
just to brand Trump. Everything. It's branding.
And then they will brand the Tea Party that was before Trump, and they will also ignore the fact that Trump asked people to vote for Kevin McCarthy. What they also forget to mention is that Marjorie Taylor Greene wanted people to vote for Kevin McCarthy because she already got a committee assignment. So I see these people, they just lazily say that this is a Trumpist element of the party. No, it's not. This is Matt Gaetz and them doing their own shit. This is not Trumpian. Trump did not want this to happen. And what she also says is that this is Tea Party tactics. Tea Party's tactics were before Trump. So going to the comment before, you see how she contradicts himself? These people constantly contradict themselves. And then she's not the only one guilty of this, by the way. That's why I want to highlight this comment, because as we showed, MSNBC did this all the time. Morning Joe immediately brought up Trump, even though Trump had nothing to do with this shit. But go ahead, CJ. You can read the last one, and we can wrap up.
That's intentional. I'll read this last one here. I was initially annoyed by the whole situation, but eventually jumped on board. You had Trump GOP members rejecting the Trump-endorsed candidate. This was about holding McCarthy accountable. After he started changing his plan, not just going along with the home team, as much as I dislike the squad, frankly, they could learn a lesson or two. So this was a conservative person saying, I don't like the squad, but they could definitely learn a lesson. Now, this will be the last one. Crystal Ball might as well be on MSNBC.
The one next to it says time for Crystal to go. Something happened to her.
Wait, let me see this.
Those are good ones. This is on the screen. Those are good ones to end on. He said Crystal might well be on MSNBC. Then other one says time for Crystal to go. Something happened to her. That or she was faking this whole time. So we want to show you guys those comments too, because these people are audience. And it's not like the most downvoted troll comments, because we get troll comments too, but then you guys get their ass. I see you guys be getting their motherfuckers. You notice these are comments that everyone in the community likes. Like the most improved comments are the ones that say that Crystal has to go, that she's thrown now. So that's devastating. Not just RB being jealous of them. I remember people said that last year. We were early in sniffing out breaking points. So literally, we did videos last year. Like, yo, this shit's not independent news. Now it's beyond obvious. So CJ, any last thoughts?
We'll cut this segment, Aaron, and no more thoughts on the segment. I mean, it speaks for itself. The comments, like, there's no more RBN just hating. Go read their comments from their own people, paying people. They describe them as, oh, I'm a paying customer, and this is some bullshit. They just go read the comments on your own. And that's all I got on it.
I don't know if you have anything else. I got wrap. I got some stories. I'll say those for tomorrow because I want to make sure I cover those really well. I don't want to do it when I'm tired. So
the Joe Biden Haitian immigration asylum is.
I got a lot of receipts on that. So that's gonna take a while. I got a lot of receipts on that one. So make sure you guys.
Yeah. All right. So
go ahead. You're better at doing it than I am.
I was just gonna say. Yeah, I was just gonna give the closing stuff. This is gonna be the closing video.
I'll see you guys tomorrow.
If you want to take off, you can. Make sure you like the stream. Make sure you join Substack. That's our Substack right there. And you'll get. We just sent the link for Discord earlier today. We might send it again tomorrow. So join Substack. Also, if you're able to support, you got the scrolling at the bottom. Join our Patreon. Like the stream on your way out. This was the count before we started the stream, 28,238. Here is our new website. Go there, check it out, and contact RBN. Let us know if any issues you find in the website or anything else. And now I'm going to check out. Here is this video. The title of this video is Grim News.
Chuck Schumer eyes a second shot at raising the minimum wage through reconciliation. Democrats capitulated to a ruling by a Senate staffer, the body's parliamentarian, the first time around. This is by Ryan Grimm. He doesn't say Democrats ridiculously and transparently bullshittingly capitulated to a ruling by the Senate. He just said the Democrats did it, not Chuck Schumer, by the way. This is called propaganda. If you don't know, if you want to see what propaganda looks like, Ryan Grimm, when he writes a column, that's what it is. When she came out and said that Joe Biden has definitely exceeded expectations for progressives, I made the joke, I can't wait to see how Ryan Grimm defends this. Like, I didn't think he would. I thought it was a joke. He did. So Ryan Knight posts this and says, this is not what Joe Biden, there's reality. Joe Biden sucks. He's not doing anything. Ryan Grimm, the guy who's the lead guy for The Intercept, their DC bureau chief, he came back. He come out and says, so you expected Joe Biden to sign Medicare for all, enact a $15 minimum wage, stop all the bombings and all the rest of this? What about Joe Biden's career gave you that high level of expectation? Is somebody criticizing the squad? Oh my God, my spidey sense is going off. That's what that is. That's Ryan Grimm. Somebody's criticizing AOC and the squad. I have to come shit on a random podcaster. I'm the DC bureau chief of the fucking billionaire funded Intercept, and I still have to peruse in Twitter defending politicians against podcasters' accurate descriptions. So this is them doing propaganda for the Democratic Party. This is the Intercept, the ones who won't print the truth about the vice president's or the president's kid, that fired their best journalists because they wanted to do censorship. And then they sent Ryan Grimm out to shit on Force to Vote and all the progressive activists, even his former employee, Brianna Joy Gray, he lied about. And he doesn't give a shit. That's Bernie's former press secretary. This is their progressive reporter, Ryan Grimm. Of course, he's sent there by the establishment to gaslight you and keep you inside the Democratic pro-war corporate party.